Chapter 788. The meat of the green sky falcon was very fragrant and delicious. It was definitely a delicacy in the world. Moreover, this kind of thing could only be found by chance. After all, ordinary people would not be as extravagant as Chu Xiu, who actually used a ferocious beast as a dish. This made the group of sect masters and family heads eat heartily. At the same time, they secretly thought that Chu Xiu was wasting natural resources. Chu Xiu sat in the main seat and watched quietly as everyone finished eating. Then, he asked, "Everyone, how is the taste?" Sun Changli was the first to stand up. He sighed and said, "It is indeed the meat of the ancient ferocious beast, the green sky falcon. It's delicious beyond description. It is even more delicious than what is described in the ancient books. This time, we are all thanks to official Chu. Otherwise, I'm afraid we would not be able to eat such a precious treasure in this life." Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Everyone, I still remember when the Jianghu Hall was just established. I'm afraid everyone thought that I, Chu Xiu, was the kind of devil who killed innocent people. Everyone was very resistant." Although they had eaten Chu Xiu's food, when they heard this, everyone curled their lips at the same time. "You, Chu Xiu, are still a demon who willfully slaughters the innocent. Moreover, they are still very resistant to it." However, the result of resistance was the destruction of their families. Therefore, they had no choice but to give in. Chu Xiu did not seem to see the helpless expression of the people present. He continued, "Actually, I am a very reasonable person. The biggest advantage of me, Chu Xiu, is that I will never mistreat my own people. In fact, is the so-called distinction between righteous and demonic in Jianghu really so serious? Everyone, you can speak with your conscience. In the end, is your own interests more important, or the so-called distinction between righteous and demonic?" Glancing at everyone present, Chu Xiu snickered and said, "From what I see, everyone has chosen the latter. If someone had chosen the former, then probably none of you would have appeared here. Instead, you would be lying in ambush outside Yanjing City, wanting to assassinate a demon like me at any time to rid the world of evil." Everyone present laughed a few times. No one spoke. In fact, this was indeed the case. Those who had enmity with the demonic path were the righteous sections. What was a righteous sect? At the very least, you have to become a reputable family first before you can be called a righteous faction. Small sects and aristocratic families like them, who mingled in the Jianghu, had always been fence-sitters. They actually didn't care much about the so-called righteous and evil paths. Chu Xiu slammed the table fiercely, scaring everyone. In a very formal tone, he said, "After saying so much, I can only summarize it in one sentence. If you follow me, Chu Xiu, it can't be said that you will eat and drink well every day, but at least there will be benefits. I will not forget you all. Now, there is a good thing waiting for you all." When everyone present heard Chu Xiu's words, their hearts tightened. They wouldn't be so naive to think that Chu Xiu really meant what he said. Sun Changli asked cautiously, "May I ask what the good thing official Chu is talking about is?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Everyone knows who I am. I once found many ancient books about the Kunlun devil cult and the hidden devil clan, and they recorded some very interesting things. In the past, some of the halls of the Kunlun devil cult placed their treasures in the entire Jianghu. Coincidentally, there are two places near the Temple of Great Light. However, everyone knows that the monks of the Temple of Great Light are rather nosy. If I were to recklessly dig for treasures, I'm afraid I'll come into conflict with those monks, so I'll have to rely on you all. When the time comes, everyone can temporarily move your families to somewhere near the Temple of Great Light and start digging for treasures openly. I'll give you a rough location. As long as you dig out the ruins, you can split 70% among yourselves. I only want 30%. Hearing this, the crowd instantly went into an uproar, and they immediately started discussing it animatedly. However, not a single person dared to agree because this matter was truly too crazy. Everyone knew that the wilderness in the far north was the territory of the Temple of Great Light, but now Chu Xiu wanted them to move there. This was practically challenging the authority of the Temple of Great Light. More importantly, they wanted to dig for treasures around the Temple of Great Light. This was practically infuriating the Temple of Great Light. Even if it were them, they wouldn't be able to accept a group of strangers digging around in front of their homes, much less the Temple of Great Light. Therefore, everyone present immediately said, "Official Chu, it's not that we don't want to help, but in this matter, we really can't do anything. Yeah, that's the Temple of Great Light. How would we dare to do this? Also, moving an entire family is a big project. Even if it's temporary, it'll still consume a lot of things." Everyone present spoke one after another. Almost all of them were against it. Not a single person was in favor of it. Chu Xiu looked at everyone silently and did not say a word. The originally noisy hall became strangely silent. Sensing that the atmosphere wasn't right, everyone present immediately went silent and did not dare to say anything else. When the hall was completely silent, Chu Xiu then said coldly, "Was the green sky falcon's meat delicious?" Chu Xiu's words were very light, but the coldness instantly penetrated their hearts, causing them to tremble violently and almost spit out the green sky falcon's meat. Only now did they understand what Chu Xiu meant by killing the green sky falcon without saying anything. "You said that the green sky falcon's meat was delicious, so I treated you to a meal from a ferocious beast. It was generous enough and generous enough. Now that I have something to ask of you, you're making excuses. This is against the rules." Chu Xiu was furious because the consequences would be severe. Chu Xiu had even killed the ferocious beast guarding the door. If they still refused, there was no need to say what would await them. None of the patriarchs and sect masters present were fools. They had already guessed Chu Xiu's intentions. Therefore, they wanted to cry but had no tears. If they knew this would happen, they would not have eaten that plate of meat. Looking at everyone present, Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said calmly, "Everyone, I know what you're worried about. You're just worried about the Temple of Great Light. However, you must also remember that the law does not punish the masses. So what if you've angered the Temple of Great Light? Can the Temple of Great Light kill all of you? The Temple of Great Light won't even suppress you in the dark because you have too many people." Everyone present thought about it carefully and felt that it made sense. Although there were times when the Temple of Great Light killed people because of personal grudges, such cases were rare. The clans and sects, big and small, added up to dozens of forces. They were not worried that the Temple of Great Light would kill them all. Otherwise, the other party would not be the Temple of Great Light but the Kunlun devil cult. However, even if their lives were not in danger, being hated by the Temple of Great Light was not something to be proud of. Therefore, everyone present wanted to evade. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "Everyone, please think carefully before you speak. The monks of the Temple of Great Light are kind and can't bear to kill the innocent, but I, Chu Xiu, have never been a generous person. He ate my food and drank my wine, but in the end, he doesn't do anything for me. What's the use of such a person?" Everyone present felt a chill in their hearts. Only then did they remember that Chu Xiu seemed to have said the same thing to the green sky falcon at the door. He had said it to the green sky falcon, but it was also said to them. The scene was silent. No one resisted, and no one agreed. It was a stalemate. At this moment, a middle-aged warrior with a mustache stood up and said with a smile, "Since Official Chu has said so, if I refuse, it would be disrespectful to Official Chu. The Feng family agrees to this. I will go back and gather the disciples to move to the Temple of Great Light." After saying that, the Feng family master turned around and was about to leave. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu said calmly, "Feng family master, looking at you, I'm afraid you're not going to move to the Temple of Great Light, but to report to the Temple of Great Light?" The Feng family master turned around and smiled awkwardly. How is that possible? Official Chu, you've misunderstood. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, did I misunderstand, or do you think I'm an idiot? Feng family master, your son has become a disciple of the Temple of Great Light. His seniority is the same as Zhong Xian's, and he is even Zhong Xian's junior brother. You've been bragging about this for a long time. Now that you're prepared to stand on my side, fine. Write a letter and ask your son to return to normal life. I will personally send someone to deliver it to the Temple of Great Light. Do you dare? The Feng family master's expression changed. He snorted and said, Official Chu, do you really want to force us into a dead end? If you have a grudge against the Temple of Great Light, that's your own business. Why must you drag us down with you? We can't comply with your actions. The words of the Feng family's patriarch echoed the thoughts of many people present. They could not afford to offend the Temple of Great Light, and neither could Chu Xiu. Therefore, it was better for them to watch from the sidelines. Chu Xiu stared at the Feng family master for a moment, then finally shook his head and said, Feng family master, you've disappointed me. I've looked into the Feng family's information. Your Feng family's ancestor was a famous bandit in the martial world. He dominated the 7 counties of northern Yan and came and went like the wind. But your Feng family's ancestor died at the hands of the Temple of Great Light's rising talent, becoming the other party's battle record to enter the Longhu leaderboard. You should have a deep grudge against the Temple of Great Light, but now you're standing on the Temple of Great Light's side. Your son hasn't even gotten married yet, but you've already sent him to the Temple of Great Light to be a monk. He won't have the chance to have any descendants in this lifetime, and he won't even be able to touch a woman. What's the point of living for someone like you who has let down your ancestors and future generations? What use do I have for you? As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu lightly moved his finger, and everyone saw the Feng clan's patriarch's entire body start to twitch. Large amounts of blood seeped out from his body and transformed into a bloody mist that drifted in the air. In practically an instant, the Feng clan's patriarch's entire body's vital energy and blood had been sucked dry, and he'd become a dried corpse. Chapter 789. A life had been lost in the blink of an eye. Everyone present seemed to be scared out of their wits, and not a single person spoke. With a wave of his hand, Chu Xiu blew away the blood mist in front of him with his righteous qi. He calmly said, Shen Feiying. Shen Feiying, who was not sitting in the middle of the crowd, but was standing behind Chu Xiu, immediately stood up and said, Here. I'll leave the Feng family to you. Within 3 days, I want this name to disappear from the northern Yan underworld. Shen Feiying respectfully bowed and said, Yes, I will obey. Shen Feiying's attitude was very obedient, and he was not forced at all. Since the day he betrayed Fang Datong, there was no turning back for him. His life, his everything, was tied to Chu Xiu. Even if Chu Xiu were to ask him to splash feces at the entrance of the Temple of Great Light, Shen Feiying would do so with tears in his eyes, much less exterminate a small aristocratic family. He would even have to beg Chu Xiu to take care of his family. The crowd shuddered again, and their eyes were filled with terror. It was only now that they understood a principle. If they angered the Great Light Temple, they might not die, but if they angered Chu Xiu, they would lose their lives now. With Chu Xiu's arrogant attitude, perhaps there would be people who would stand up for justice and kill the evil spirit in the end, but most of them would probably not live to see that day. At this time, standing in the back hall, Lu Fengxian saw the scene in the hall through the window. He only frowned slightly and did not say much. He had never agreed with the way Chu Xiu did things, but he would never advise Chu Xiu. It was just like how others could not persuade Lu Fengxian. Even if Lu Fengxian did not agree with this matter, as long as you became his friend, Lu Fengxian would stand by your side no matter what you did. Perhaps in the eyes of others, Lu Fengxian's behavior was simply not distinguishing between right and wrong, but for Lu Fengxian, he could not disappoint the world, but as long as he did not disappoint his friend, that was enough. Shui Wuxiang, who was standing behind Lu Fengxian, quite agreed with Chu Xiu's approach. The method of killing for the sake of killing is a bit too extreme, but Chu Xiu was able to find a balance. The world can only see that he is cruel and bloodthirsty, but in reality, killing is a means to him. Killing one person can intimidate so many people. It's worth it. Speaking of this, Shui Wuxiang was also a little sad. In the past, LV Wenho did not understand this point, and killed too much, which was why he ended up like this. For LV Wenho, although he killed to solve problems, he was different from Chu Xiu. LV Wenho's method of solving problems was only to kill. In the end, he killed all enemies of the world, but he was killed instead. If LV Wenho had listened to his advice back then, and not be so extreme in his actions, the legend of the demon LV Wenho might not be the legend of the demon LV Wenho, but the overlord LV Wenho. Lu Fengxian turned around and asked, "You also think that Brother Chu is right?" Shui Wuxiang nodded and said, "Of course he is. If he did not use such a method, and recklessly attacked the Great Light Temple, it would be equivalent to seeking death." Lu Fengxian suddenly sighed and said, "Actually, you should join Brother Chu. Following me is too much of a waste of your abilities." If an ordinary person said something like this, it would definitely be a criticism. However, when Lu Fengxian said it, it was extremely sincere. Shui Wuxiang and the others also knew this, so they directly said, "My lord, we are willing to recognize you as our lord because you have the inheritance of the old lord, so you will always be our lord. No matter how outstanding Chu Xiu is, he is still an outsider. My lord, please do not mention such things in the future." Lu Fengxian nodded. In fact, he was also a little touched. In fact, when he took in these 4 people, Lu Fengxian was a little resistant. He was not used to having so many people by his side. However, after getting along with them, he realized that these 4 people really did not have any selfish intentions towards him. Regardless of whether he wanted to hear what they said or not, they were at least for his own good. That was why Shui Wuxiang and the others said it. At this moment, everyone in the surroundings had been completely terrified by Chu Xiu's ruthless methods. No one doubted that if they continued to resist or tried to play tricks like the Feng clan's patriarch had, then they would probably become dried corpses on the ground. At this time, Bai Wuji walked in from the inner hall, bowed respectfully to Chu Xiu, and said in a deep voice, "The northern fluttering snow city is willing to follow official Chu, and be at official Chu's beck and call." This time, everyone present was really shocked. Who would have thought that the northern fluttering snow city, a force that had some enmity with Chu Xiu in the early years, would actually choose to submit to Chu Xiu? In fact, the news of Bai Hantian's death was already known by most people. After all, Bai Hantian was considered a character in the entire northern Yan. But the matter of Chu Xiu saving the northern fluttering snow city was not known to most people. Therefore, in the eyes of most people, Bai Wuji, as the heir of the northern fluttering snow city, was the city lord, and could also represent the position of the northern fluttering snow city. Bai Xiaotian was right. Although he was the martial Dao grandmaster, and he was also the one who turned the tide and saved the northern fluttering snow city, his reputation was really not as good as Bai Wuji's. At least outside, everyone recognized Bai Wuji as the heir of the northern fluttering snow city, not Bai Xiaotian. At this time, Bai Wuji's appearance at this time was like the straw that broke the camel's back, letting them know what to choose. The crowd looked at each other, immediately bowed, and said in a deep voice, "We are also willing to follow official Chu's beck and call." Although Bai Hantian was dead, and the northern fluttering snow city had become a joke, and its strength was extremely weak. But no matter how weak the northern fluttering snow city was, the other party was still one of the overlords of the northern land. The tiger died, the tiger's prestige still existed, and Bai Wuji's weight was not low. He took the lead to submit. How could the others dare to refuse? Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Everyone, in the future, you will know that you have made a wise choice. A smile that was uglier than crying appeared on the faces of everyone present. They did not know whether it was wise or not, but they knew that if they did not choose this now, they might not be able to leave the Jianghu hall. After everyone left, Bai Wuji hesitated and said, "Sir, are you really going to make a move on the Great Light Temple?" The Northern Yen martial arts world could not be compared with the Eastern Qi martial arts world. Even in terms of the number of top sects, the Northern Yen was not even comparable to the Western Chu. The reason why the Eastern Qi martial arts world was strong was that the Eastern Qi was located in the Central Plains. It was a vast land with abundant resources, so most of the sects with a long history were in the Eastern Qi. And the reason why the Western Chu martial arts world was strong was that the Western Chu imperial court did not do anything, causing the people of the Western Chu land to be fierce and strong. Therefore, among the martial arts world forces in these three places, it seemed that the Northern Yen was the easiest to manage, but in fact, it was not because the Northern Yen had the Great Light Temple. Taoism was peaceful and inactive. In addition to the Chunyang Dao sect, the real martial arts sect was also in the Eastern Qi territory, but even the Chunyang Dao sect rarely intervened in the affairs of the imperial court. But the Great Light Temple was different. Any existence that they did not like, the Great Light Temple would intervene. With such an overlord-level force in the Northern Yen, the entire Northern Yen martial arts world felt great pressure. Now, Chu Xiu actually wanted to compete with such an existence. In Bai Wuji's view, it was a bit dangerous. It was more appropriate to let the entire Yinma clan behind Chu Xiu come. "Do you regret it?" Chu Xiu asked. Bai Wuji shook his head and said, "Of course not, but now that I have become your subordinate, I should naturally help you solve your problems. I don't understand your plan, so I'm afraid it won't be good for me to take action." Chu Xiu casually waved his hand and said, "We don't have to do anything this time, just watch. I also know the strength of the Great Light Temple, so of course, I won't be so stupid as to fight the Great Light Temple to the end. To put it bluntly, my plan is a bit shameful. It is used to disgust the Great Light Temple. With so many people digging around in the Great Light Temple's territory, if the Great Light Temple has the guts, then they can kill. If they don't, then they can only endure." At this point, Chu Xiu sneered and said, "This time, I want to see if those monks are really merciful or fake." As soon as Chu Xiu said this, Bai Wuji immediately understood what was going on. It had to be said that this move of Chu Xiu was indeed a bit sinister, but it was only useful against the Great Light Temple. If it were anyone else, they would directly start a massacre and kill a few families, and the rest would naturally fall apart. Even if Chu Xiu threatened them, it would be useless. They would die either way. However, it was different now. Retreating was death, but advancing was not necessarily the same. At this time, in the outside world, whether it was the family heads who had accepted their fate or those who had secretly sent messages to the Great Light Temple, everyone had already made some simple preparations and temporarily moved their families to the wild lands of the far north. It was not easy to drag along one's family, so it took more than 10 days before all the forces were ready to depart. The cold lands of the far north where the Great Light Temple was located had a very harsh environment. If it was said that the extreme north where the Drifts Now city was located was only a little colder, but there were still some living creatures living there. But the bitter cold of the extreme north was a true land of death, with no signs of life in a radius of several hundred miles. However, this was very useful for the warriors of the Great Light Temple. For the new disciples of the Great Light Temple, staying away from the bustling city was beneficial to their cultivation. It could allow the disciples to not be contaminated by the outside world when they were young. When these disciples came of age, they could also use this bitter cold environment to comprehend and cultivate their character. However, recently, the warriors of the Great Light Temple felt that something was not right. Dozens of Northern Yen forces came to set up camp around the Great Light Temple, and they even built simple pavilions. Although the practicality could not be compared to their homes, it was not a problem for them to stay here temporarily. After discovering this, the Great Light Temple immediately went to inform the abbot. In the end, the abbot unexpectedly went into seclusion, leaving only Su Yun behind. Of course, everyone was used to it. In the Great Light Temple, Su Yun was almost equivalent to another abbot. Chapter 790. Inside the Great Light Temple, incense was burning brightly, and the entire temple was enveloped in the majestic sound of Buddha. Anyone who heard it could not help but feel a sense of solemnity. However, there were very few Great Light Temple disciples active inside the temple. Most of them were cultivating in seclusion. The moon-worshipping cult war had just ended, and the Great Light Temple was the main participant in this war. Half of the temple's elites had participated in that war. In theory, there was no winner or loser in this war, but the Great Light Temple had suffered some damage. Therefore, the injured disciples were all recovering, while the disciples who had participated in the war but were not injured were cultivating in seclusion. They wanted to digest all the experience they had gained from that war. At that moment, in Su Yun's meditation hall, Su Yun was looking at the situation reported by a disciple. He passed the information to Su Yen, who was sitting in front of him, and said calmly, "Take a look." Su Yen took the information and looked at it, while Su Yun picked up a teacup and brewed some tea. The righteous qi instantly caused the water in the teapot to boil. When it was poured into the teacup, the originally yellow tea leaves turned dark green. They immediately released a rich but pleasant aroma. Su Yun handed Su Yen a cup of tea and said, "This is snow lotus tea from the peak of the Great Snow Mountain. I guarded it for 3 years and only managed to gather a few stalks. After frying it, there are less than 2 tails left." Su Yen took the tea and drank it in one gulp like a cow chewing on a peony. Only then did he frown and say, "Senior, someone is causing trouble. I don't believe those sects and families have the guts to provoke the Great Light Temple. Aside from dealing with those demonic path sects, the Great Light Temple rarely bullied others. However, at the same time, the Great Light Temple's dignity was not to be challenged. Therefore, almost no one dared to provoke the Great Light Temple. In the end, this group of sects and aristocratic families had all appeared around the Temple of Great Light, openly taking root in the territory of the Temple of Great Light. Aside from the fact that they had lost their minds, there was someone behind them causing trouble. Su Yun poured another cup of tea for Su Yen and said, "The aftermath of the moon-worshipping cult incident is still here, and now someone is causing trouble. In troubled times, we must be more cautious. Junior brother, drink slowly. Your mind is in a mess, and that's not good." Among the senior and junior brothers of the Su generation, apart from Su Du, whose strength could not be seen through, Su Yun actually wanted to nurture Su Yen the most. There were too many martial art practitioners in the Great Light Temple, and the seniority was a bit messy. Back then, among the entire Su generation, there were people of all ages, and Su Yen was the most inconspicuous one. Compared to him, he was inferior to Abbot Su Ci and Su Yun, who were older than him. Compared to him, he was not as fast as Su Du, who had made a name for himself. However, such a seemingly mediocre statement was taken seriously by Su Yun. Because he cultivated the Furious Diamond Heart Sutra. This technique of the Vajra department could be said to be extremely ferocious and violent. It was a top-notch body-refining technique that could be mastered quickly without affecting its subsequent power. However, it was rather difficult to control the fury of the guardian deity. Su Yen managed to do this. He hid his fury in his heart, just like a martial art practitioner subduing the inner monkey. However, what Su Yen subdued was a furious guardian deity that was not under his control. There were many people in the Great Light Temple who were stronger than Su Yen in terms of martial art talent, but what they lacked was someone like Su Yen who could maintain this clarity of mind at all times. Su Yen thought about it and said, "Even if someone is causing trouble, this group of people is just a motley crew. We don't need to be too flustered. Let Zhong Xian investigate first." After the great battle between the righteous and demonic paths, he has already completely familiarized himself with his own power. It's time for him to come into contact with some matters of the sect. As the successor that the Great Light Temple was grooming, Zhongxian's strength was sufficient. In fact, among the younger generation, there were almost only a handful who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. However, the problem was that with Zhongxian's personality, he was still far from becoming someone who could manage the entire Great Light Temple. Hence, now that Zhongxian was still young, Su Yan also wanted Zhongxian to get more involved in the affairs of the Jianghu and familiarize himself with them. Su Yun nodded and said, "Then I'll leave this matter to you first. I'll go and find Su Jing to do some divination. The turmoil in the Jianghu is not calm again." After saying that, Su Yun moved his feet and his figure instantly disappeared from the meditation room. Su Yan, who was sitting where he was, shook his head and drank another mouthful of tea. However, this time, he did not swallow it all in one gulp. This allowed him to have a slightly different taste. At this time, around the Great Light Temple, dozens of families had already begun to break ground and build. It looked like they were going to set up camp here. Buddhism was originally a peaceful place, but the positions that these dozens of families had chosen allowed the martial art practitioners of the Great Light Temple to stand at a high place and be able to see them at a glance. There was no need to mention how vexed this was. However, while they were vexed, the dozens of families were even more vexed. This was not something that they wanted to come here, but they were forced to do so. Although Chu Xiu had given them a rough area to dig in their opinion, this matter still seemed somewhat unreliable. However, since they were already here, what else could they do? They could only let their disciples continue digging. However, at this time, a disciple came forward to report that they had dug something up. As soon as this news came out, many of the family heads and sect leaders immediately gathered there and whispered to each other. They had previously suspected that Chu Xiu was deceiving them, but they did not expect that he had really dug something up and brought it here. Furthermore, this was not impossible. After all, the surroundings of the Great Light Temple did not seem safe, but it was coincidentally the safest place. In all these years, who would dare to wander around the Great Light Temple? Only the Kunlun devil cult from 500 years ago would dare to do so. Sun Changli was the first to rub his hands and said, "Everyone, let's dig and see what good stuff is inside." After all, this is something that the Kunlun devil cult had buried in the past. The good stuff is probably beyond our imagination. As soon as they heard this, everyone immediately sent people to dig. In less than half a day, a small underground palace appeared before their eyes. This underground palace was originally a place where the Blood Demon Hall had hidden some of their resources in the past, so there were not too many dangers and traps. There was only a formation to protect it. Chu Xiu had taught everyone how to break the formation, so it was very easy for them to open this underground palace. Everyone entered the underground palace and looked at the boxes of refined pills, various types of strange metals, and even forged weapons and hidden weapons. They were almost all the hard currency of the martial world, and everyone's eyes were red with envy. Even if the items that the Kunlun devil cult had collected in the past were just ordinary cultivation resources, they would still be extraordinary in the hands of these small families and sections. Even if the dozens of forces were to split 80% of the treasures in this underground palace, they would still make a huge profit. Of course, there were also people who wondered if they should suggest that they take more of the things here. After all, Chu Xiu did not know how many treasures they had found. However, this idea was extinguished as soon as it appeared, because Shen Feiying was among these people. This was the loyal lackey of Chu Xiu. In order to curry favor with Chu Xiu, he did not care about his reputation at all. Previously, when Chu Xiu asked him to destroy the Feng family, he directly led all the elites of the giant spirit gang and even took the lead. It took less than 6 hours to destroy the Feng family. Now, if they had the idea of taking everything for themselves, Shen Feiying would definitely tell on them. Moreover, it was not only Shen Feiying. Who knew what the people present were thinking? If someone agreed on the surface, but secretly told on them, they would not even know how they died. After all, if one family died, there would be one less family to share the benefits. Therefore, everyone suppressed the greed in their hearts and said in unison, "Take out the things first. After distributing them, send official Chu's share to the Jianghu hall. After that, we will divide the rest equally." After no one had any doubts, everyone was just about to pull out the things when a disciple of a small family ran over in a panic and said, "Not good. Not good. The people from the Great Light Temple are here to inquire." Everyone present looked at each other and sighed. What was meant to come would eventually come. They did not dare to face Chu Xiu for fear of being killed. Therefore, they could only face the Great Light Temple. Moreover, even if they were very resistant before, after the treasures in the underground palace were discovered, they suddenly realized that their resistance did not seem to be so strong. Something like profit was enough to make many people lose sight of themselves and take risks out of desperation. Although the leaders of the families present thought that they could see themselves clearly, there was still an underground palace that had not been excavated. Even if Chu Xiu asked them to leave now, they would not be willing to leave. "Everyone, let's go and meet the people from the Great Light Temple. However, please do not forget what official Chu ordered," Shen Feiying said sinisterly. He scoffed. Although everyone listened, it did not mean that they would not look down on traitors like Shen Feiying. The leader of the Great Light Temple was Zhong Xian. However, Su Yan knew Zhong Xian's personality. He naturally would not just throw Zhong Xian out like that. Someone must watch over him. Other than Zhong Xian and dozens of disciples from the Great Light Temple, there was another person with the Dharma name Ming Jing. He was one of the more outstanding people in the Ming generation of the Great Light Temple. Back when he was cultivating in the Vajra institution, he was a rare powerhouse in the oneness of heaven and man realm. After the great war between the righteous and demonic in the moon-worshipping cult, he took the opportunity to fight with the powerhouses of the moon-worshipping cult and learned something. Therefore, he successfully entered the martial arts master realm. Su Yan was training him with all his might and even had the intention of making him the next Vajra institution's first seat. At that moment, everyone walked in and greeted him with smiles on their faces. They even had people serve them tea and water. Their attitudes were extremely polite. "We did not know that the eminent monks of the Great Light Temple would come. It is our fault for not coming out to welcome you." However, seeing the people present, Mingjing's expression suddenly darkened. He said coldly, "Leaders of the families, shouldn't you give the Great Light Temple an explanation?" Chapter 791. The Great Light Temple's rebuke was within everyone's expectations. In fact, from the moment they chose to do this, they were already prepared. Hearing Mingjing's rebuke, everyone still put on an innocent expression and said, "May I ask what explanation Master Mingjing wants?" "I don't think we've done anything." Mingjing said coldly, "Didn't do anything? Why didn't you stay in your own territory? What's the meaning of coming to the Great Light Temple?" Although these sect leaders and family heads were not very strong, they were all people who had fought in the Jianghu. They might not be good at anything else, but they were good at pretending to be ignorant and arguing. Someone immediately said, "Mingjing, please don't be offended. We really didn't know that the Great Light Temple didn't allow people to come. If we had known, we definitely wouldn't have dared to do this." Mingjing frowned. Why did these words sound so awkward to him? But at this time, he did not care if it was awkward or not. He said directly, "Fine, then all of you will move now." Everyone hurriedly agreed, "No problem. We will let our disciples prepare and all move. We can leave in about 10 days. Mingjing was also experienced in the Jianghu. When dealing with this group of slippery people, she could not believe everything they said. Even though they had agreed quite nicely and were all making solemn vows, Mingjing could guarantee that when she returned 10 days later, this group of people would definitely not even budge a single step from this place. Their attitude was very good, but they were determined not to change. Even a delay could make one feel helpless. So Mingjing said directly, "There's no need to wait for 10 days. You can move now." Everyone present immediately cried out in grievance, "Now? We really can't do that. With so many disciples and a lot of things that need to be moved, there's not even enough time to prepare. Moreover, Master Mingjing, we are around the Great Light Temple, and we can also admire the Buddha's light and comprehend the Buddha's nature. We will absolutely not cause any trouble for you. Could it be that the Great Light Temple will reject us thousands of miles away?" Mingjing was so angry that her eyebrows jumped. How could this group of people be qualified to comprehend the Buddhist nature? At this time, Zongxian suddenly stood up. The aura around him gathered bit by bit, and he said expressionlessly, "You are lying. Surrounding the Great Light Temple, acting sneakily and harboring malicious intentions, they should be killed." Zongxian's murderous nature wasn't that strong, but no matter what he did or what he did, he was weird. More accurately, he was very rigid. Whenever he thought of a problem, he would only use the simplest method to solve it. He didn't even know how to beat around the bush. In any case, in Zongxian's opinion, this group of people were simply lying and plotting against him. With such behavior, it was the simplest to kill them as a warning to others. Feeling the strong aura around Zongxian, everyone was shocked. Chu Xiu was not here. Even if they went all out, they would not be able to defeat Zongxian. Although Chu Xiu kept saying that they would definitely be fine and that the people from the Great Light Temple would not dare to kill them, there was always the possibility of accidents happening. For example, Zongxian was such an accident. Fortunately, Zongxian did not care about anything, but Mingjing did. This group of people could scare him, but killing him was too much. Moreover, there were so many people here. Even if he were to kill them all, he wouldn't be able to kill them all in a short time. Therefore, he grabbed Zongxian and hurriedly transmitted his voice, "Zongxian. Calm down. You can't kill these people. It's easy to kill them, but it will affect the reputation of the Great Light Temple for so many years." Zongxian still gave face to Mingjing, who was a martial uncle, and did not continue to make a move. Mingjing also breathed a sigh of relief, then coldly snorted and said, "You've all seen it. Zongxian's temper isn't very good. If you anger him, you know what the consequences are." Everyone present was also a little shocked by Zongxian's appearance, but they also said helplessly, "Master Mingjing, this bitter and cold land in the extreme north is a good place for the Great Light Temple to cultivate, but for us, it's really a bitter and cold land. If there weren't any special reasons, we wouldn't want to come here. However, there are people who forced us to come here. Once we retreat, we might even lose our lives. Rather than losing our lives somewhere else, it's better to die in the hands of all of you masters. At least it'll be an honorable death. If Master Mingjing wants to kill us, we definitely won't resist." Everyone looked like gangsters, with a roguish attitude of, "If you want to kill us, just kill us, we'll just wait to be captured without putting up a fight." Their words revealed the existence of Chu Xiu, and it was also Chu Xiu who instructed them to do so. Chu Xiu did not mind the Great Light Temple knowing that he was the one behind all this. Anyway, he was not here, so it was up to the Great Light Temple to deal with it. Of course, if the Great Light Temple really had the guts to kill all these people, Chu Xiu would immediately admit defeat and hide underground. Righteous sects also cared about their reputation, and when they did not care about their reputation, that was the most terrifying thing. At this moment, Mingjing was feeling such a pain in the ass. It was not that he had never killed people before, but in this kind of situation, how could he kill? "I hope you don't regret your choice today." Mingjing coldly snorted and directly left with Zongxian and the others who were unwilling. After they left, Zongxian said in a voice without any emotion, "Master Mingjing, why didn't you let me do it just now? You should be able to see that although they keep saying that someone forced them, in reality, they did not resist that kind of coercion too much." Mingjing smiled bitterly and said, what can you do even if you do it? Kill them all? This group of people almost all came from the area under the jurisdiction of the subduing Martial Hall, so it's already very clear who the person behind them is. Chu Xiu is ruthless and cunning. This time, he even came up with a vicious plan to target our Great Light Temple. I'm afraid that Chu Xiu can't wait for our Great Light Temple to kill all these people. That way, our Great Light Temple's reputation will really be finished. For so many years, our Great Light Temple has exterminated demons and protected the righteous path, killing all the evil demons and murderers in the world. When have we ever killed the innocent? Although this group of people is not a righteous sect, they are not of the demonic path either. If we kill them all, how will the people of the pugilistic world look at our Great Light Temple? Our 10,000 years of reputation will be destroyed in a day. Zhong Xian looked at the slightly agitated Ming Jing and said coolly, they are considered innocent? Who dares to say that there is no sin in these people? Since we want to kill all the evil demons and murderers in the world, why should we care about what other people think and what other people think? The so-called reputation is like the appearance of a person. I have a compassionate Buddha's heart. So what if tens of thousands of people curse me? With a clear mirror in my heart, even if I am in a sea of blood, I will not be stained by dirt. Uncle Master Ming Jing, your current state of mind is not worthy of your Dharma name. Ming Jing was so infuriated by Zhong Xian's words that she almost fainted on the spot. She slapped her head hard and suddenly said, Zhong Xian, have you been hanging out with Chief Monk Shudu recently? This kind of bickering tone that could infuriate people to death seemed to make sense at first glance. Wasn't this Shudu's style? Although Zhong Xian's way of thinking was slightly different from normal people, it was not so infuriating. Zhong Xian nodded and said, yes, but I feel that what Chief Monk Shudu said is very reasonable. Although his understanding of Buddhism is unconventional and unconventional, it is still an excellent interpretation. Ming Jing slapped her head again and said helplessly, don't stay with Shudu for too long in the future. If there's anything, go ask Chief Monk Shuyun or the abbot. Zhong Xian was the future heir of the Great Light Temple. Although he seemed unreliable now, with his strength, he would definitely become an ultimate powerhouse that could stir up the Jianghu. As long as he sat in the position of abbot, he could intimidate the evil demons and rascals. At that time, there would naturally be other people to take care of the various problems. However, even so, if Zhong Xian was as crazy as Shudu, would the Great Light Temple still have any face left? After returning to the Great Light Temple, Ming Jing told Su Yan everything that had happened and secretly reported on Zhong Xian. Of course, in his opinion, he was doing this for Zhong Xian's own good. Hearing that the matter involved Chu Xiu, Su Yan felt a headache coming on. This person was not to be trifled with, at least for now. He did not have time to care about the matter between Shudu and Zhong Xian. Su Yan said directly, go, find out where Chu Xiu is now. This matter was specially instructed by Su Yun, and Su Yan understood Su Yun's intentions. In the Great Light Temple, there were people who could stand their own ground, but it was not enough, far from enough. Su Yan did not have much desire for power. He was already satisfied with being the Vajrayard's first seat, so what he wanted now was the stability of the Great Light Temple itself. At that moment, Chu Xiu was not in Yanjing City, nor did he wander around the bitter cold lands of the far north with those people. He was now in the fluttering snow city, waiting for the people from the Great Light Temple to come knocking. Chu Xiu had never planned to use force to deal with the Great Light Temple. That would only suit Xiang Long's intentions. Right now, he had no plans to risk his life for the Northern Yan Imperial Court. If he were to discuss the Great Light Temple a little, he believed that there would definitely be people who would take the initiative to come and talk to him. It was a peaceful place for Buddhism, but the surroundings had turned into a construction site. This was really troublesome. Although Chu Xiu had been to the fluttering snow city before, he had not toured it too much. At that moment, he was bored, so he got by Xiao Tian to bring him around the fluttering snow city. The fluttering snow city had a long history, but there was actually nothing much to see. This was because the fluttering snow city was not a sect with an impressive background. In the beginning, the Bai clan of the fluttering snow city was just a small clan that had been ostracized in the central plains and had come to the far north to establish a force. After many generations of development and power, they had absorbed many outsiders, which was how the fluttering snow city of today became. Therefore, there was nothing much to see. Just as Chu Xiu was preparing to go back, someone came to report that someone from the Great Light Temple was requesting an audience. After waiting for so long, they're finally here. This group of monks is really patient. Chapter 792. Su Yan followed Bai Wuji into the fluttering snow city. Looking at Bai Wuji's figure in front of him, Su Yan couldn't help but reveal a strange expression. Honestly speaking, when he first learned that Chu Xiu was actually in the fluttering snow city, and that the fluttering snow city had even sided with Chu Xiu, Su Yan was really surprised. It wasn't that the Great Brilliance Temple was slow in their news, but to the Great Brilliance Temple, the grudges and killings in the northern Yen land were really too boring. It was so boring that the Great Brilliance Temple didn't even want to participate in it. Their eyes were only focused on the situation of the entire Jianghu. Therefore, after the incident at the drifting snow city in the extreme north, the disciples of the Great Brilliance Temple did not even report it. After knowing that Chu Xiu was at the drifting snow city in the extreme north, Su Yan finally understood what had happened during this period of time. After knowing everything that happened in the fluttering snow city, Su Yan also felt a little sad. A major sect that was so close to the Great Brilliance Temple was gone just like that. Although in the eyes of others, the fluttering snow city had weakened, it still existed. But in Su Yan's eyes, from the moment the fluttering snow city sided with that demon, Chu Xiu, they had already abandoned themselves and were no longer the fluttering snow city of the past. Thinking of this, Su Yan couldn't help but sigh, "Little friend Bai, in the past, you and my sect's Zong Xian were both elites on the Longhu leaderboard. Although your fluttering snow city doesn't abhor evil, but all these years, you have stood on the side of the righteous path. But now, you've sided with Chu Xiu, becoming an accomplice of the demonic path. Why do you have to do this?" Bai Wuji didn't even turn his head. He only said calmly, "When did my fluttering snow city not want to become a righteous sect and live in glory? But when my fluttering snow city was in danger, who cared about my fluttering snow city? It's not that we didn't beg the Great Brilliance Temple, but in the end, we couldn't even enter the door. Of course, this is also what my fluttering snow city deserves. The sins of the previous generation will be repaid by the current generation. But since Buddha isn't willing to help me, why are you complaining that I've joined the demonic path?" Su Yan sighed and did not say anything else. This matter could only be said to be a joke of fate. It was not that the Temple of Great Light did not want to help, but that they could not. The disciples were not in the wrong. The Temple of Great Light would not care about such matters. To put it bluntly, what happened in the northern fluttering snow city was a conflict between the forces of the martial arts world. If the Great Light Temple were to intervene in this kind of matter, there would be people begging them for help in the future. At that time, would the Great Light Temple intervene? Hence, such matters couldn't be said out loud and could only turn a blind eye to it. But in the end, the Drifts Now city was pushed towards Chu Xiu's side. When the demonic path did things, they did not seek fame, but only profit. Chu Xiu brought Su Yan into the Great Hall. Chu Xiu directly sat on the seat that belonged to the Drifts Now city lord of the northern Drifts Now city. As he smiled, "Grandmaster Su Yan came from afar. I apologize for not going out to welcome you. I hope Grandmaster won't take offense." Although Chu Xiu said not to take offense, he had no intention of standing up at this moment. Su Yan stared at Chu Xiu and did not get angry. After a while, he said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu, what do you mean by this? Other than infuriating my Temple of Great Light by playing those little tricks of yours, it doesn't bring you any benefits. The great battle between the righteous and demonic factions has just ended. Although your hidden devil lineage didn't suffer too much damage, you can't really think that my righteous path of martial arts world doesn't have the strength to fight anymore, right? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, Grandmaster Su Yan, if I say that I was forced to do this, would you believe me? Su Yan was so angry that he laughed instead. I sent people to ask the sect masters and clan heads of those small factions, and they said that they were forced to do so. Now that I've found you here, you also say that you were forced to do so, and that all of you are innocent people. Yet, this matter has become my Temple of Great Light's fault? Chu Xiu stared at Su Yan and said plainly, in Jianghu, one has no choice. There are too many things in this world that cannot be helped. Those sects and families are not as strong as my Jianghu Hall, so I can force them. I am now attached to the Northern Yan Imperial Court. Although my words carry enormous weight in Jianghu Hall, I still have to listen to the Imperial Court. So, Xiang Long forced me, and I could only act. Su Yan frowned and said, this is Xiang Long's order? Chu Xiu nodded and directly sold Xiang Long out. It is Xiang Long's order. This Northern Yan lord has reached the end of his life. He wants to leave behind a stable Northern Yan for his descendants. Naturally, the Temple of Great Light, a place outside the law, has to be dealt with. Of course, Xiang Long did not expect to destroy the Temple of Great Light, but his ultimate goal was to bring the Temple of Great Light under the rule of the Northern Yan. Of course, there is a cause and effect. For so many years, the Temple of Great Light has not done anything to provoke the authority of the Northern Yan Imperial Court in this land of extreme north. This time, Xiang Long did not do this for the sake of his descendants, but because your Temple of Great Light has gone too far. Su Yan snorted softly and said, what has my Temple of Great Light done? As long as a disciple of my Temple of Great Light is able to step into Jianghu, they will abide by the precepts and will not cause trouble. Su Yan dared to say this. The Temple of Great Light had strict precepts. The first thing a disciple did upon entering the temple was not to practice martial arts, but to recite Buddhist scriptures and cultivate their character. Then, after familiarizing themselves with the precepts, they would be assigned to one of the 6 major martial academies or the 3 major meditation halls. Chu Xiu sneered and said, is that so? Some time ago, an old monk from your Temple of Great Light's Dharma court killed General Nan Qianli of Donglin County's Iron Guard just because he cultivated demonic techniques. It seems that your Temple of Great Light really hates my demonic path to the core. When he heard this, Su Yan immediately understood what was going on. He knew about this matter, but that old monk was a disciple of the previous generation of the Temple of Great Light. He was extremely senior, and even Su Yan had to call him martial uncle. What else could he do? Punish him? Moreover, the person was from the Dharma court. When the Dharma court's first seat, Su Xing, heard about this matter, he even praised him without restraint, causing Su Yan to feel very helpless. Su Yan was originally prepared to explain himself when the Northern Yan Imperial Court came to question him. In the end, he did not expect Xiang Long to be so agitated by this matter that he did not even question him. Instead, he directly prepared to deal with the Temple of Great Light. Su Yan frowned and said, but that Nan Qianli used human lives to cultivate demonic techniques, which is a taboo in the pugilistic world. It's pardonable for the Temple of Great Light to take action. Chu Xiu sneered and said, Master Su Yan, you'd better tell this to Xiang Long and not to me. Nan Qianli used human lives to cultivate, but those were Northern Yan prisoners. Moreover, no matter how vicious the demonic techniques he cultivated were, he was first and foremost a member of the Northern Yan Imperial Court. The Northern Yan Imperial Court had the right to kill him, but you didn't. Now, you killed him without saying a word, and you even barged into the military camp to kill him. You're impressive and domineering, so you'll naturally have to bear the consequences. Moreover, to put it bluntly, isn't the Temple of Great Light also bullying the weak and fearing the strong when you kill people? Nan Qianli was a lone cultivator. Apart from his status in the imperial court, he had no backing. However, I, Chu Xiu, have also killed many people. Master Su Yan, you're standing right in front of me. Why didn't you take action to eliminate the demons? Su Yan's face immediately showed anger. Even though he had a good temper, he could not stand Chu Xiu's humiliation. Chu Xiu, are you really prepared to fight the Temple of Great Light to the end? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, of course not. If I really wanted to make things difficult for the Temple of Great Light, why would I tell the truth so clearly to you, Master Su Yan? Xianglong is a heartless person, and I'm still a pugilistic world person. Even though I've helped the Northern Yan Imperial Court do so many things, he still doesn't trust me. This time, he deliberately asked me to do it. He wanted me to fight with the Temple of Great Light to the end, and in the end, draw out the clan of the Hidden Devil behind me, causing both of us to fight to the point where both sides suffer. The only one who would benefit from this would be the Northern Yan Imperial Court. So now, I'm only using these little tricks and have not directly attacked the Temple of Great Light. Master Su Yan, you should know very well what this means. Su Yan frowned. Of course, he knew, but it was precisely because of this that this matter was difficult to handle. Touching Chu Xiu would be helping the Northern Yan Imperial Court, and it would not benefit the Temple of Great Light. The great battle between the orthodox and demonic factions had just ended, and the moon-worshipping cult was heavily injured. The orthodox sects were all recuperating. If they were to have another great battle with the Hidden Devil faction, not only would the Temple of Great Light not be able to handle it, the other sects might not be willing to help the Temple of Great Light. Looking at Chu Xiu, Su Yan said coldly, then how do you plan to deal with it? The group of people surrounding the Great Light Temple must not stay there forever. Chu Xiu had been waiting for Su Yan to say this. He extended 3 fingers and said, 3 months. I only need 3 months. This time is enough for me to account to Xianglong. When the time comes, I will have them retreat. Of course, if the Temple of Great Light is not willing to wait for these 3 months, they can just kill them. If the Temple of Great Light can do something so ruthless, I will concede defeat and avoid the Temple of Great Light from now on. Su Yan snorted coldly, turned around, and left. If the Temple of Great Light dared to kill people, why would he rush to see Chu Xiu now? Behind Su Yan, a smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. Su Yan did not agree, which meant that he had tacitly agreed. In these 3 months, the Temple of Great Light would not disturb him, which was enough for Chu Xiu to find the things that Lu Jianghe had buried. At the same time, he would be able to account to Xianglong. At the side, Bai Wuji was a little doubtful. Sir, are you sure the Temple of Great Light will not make a move? With the Temple of Great Light's personality, they will not tolerate sand in their eyes. Chu Xiu said calmly, can't tolerate sand? That depends on how big the sand is. Don't think that the Temple of Great Light is really untainted by the mud. In the martial world, everything depends on strength. The things that I have done are 100 or 1,000 times more evil than that Nan Qianli. Why don't I see anyone coming to me to kill demons and defend justice? Because my strength is stronger than that Nan Qianli's. Because my background is also stronger than Nan Qianli's. If the Temple of Great Light really cannot tolerate sand in their eyes, then there would have been no Temple of Great Light in the martial world 500 years ago. Chapter 793. Outside Yanjing City, an old man in a black robe with a gloomy face looked at the city wall in front of him and said in a low voice, "Is this Yanjing City? The northern barbarian land is not as prosperous as the Central Plains. It's about the same as West Chu." There were a few warriors beside him. One of them, who looked like a rat, immediately smiled apologetically. Master is right. Northern Yan was suppressed by Eastern Qi a few decades ago. It's only now that they've made a comeback. It's good enough that they're at this scale. The old man sneered and said, Chu Xiu doesn't stay in the Central Plains. He hides in this northern barbarian land. It's not good. Several warriors around him said, yes, this time Master is here to teach Chu Xiu a lesson. We can't let go of senior brother's revenge. This old man was the 10 Directions Old Devil, Yuan Tianfang, and some of his disciples. In the past, during the war between the righteous and the demonic, Chu Xiu killed Yuan Tianfang's favorite disciple, Xing Situ. The two sides had become sworn enemies. However, at that time, Wei Shuya stopped him and Dong Huang Tai spoke for him. Yuan Tianfang couldn't touch Chu Xiu even if he wanted to. Moreover, after returning, there were also many big shots of the hidden devil lineage who passed on the message for Yuan Tianfang to calm down. Chu Xiu could not be killed, at least not now. Now, Chu Xiu was the face of the Yinma clan. It was not an exaggeration to say that Chu Xiu was the number one person in the younger generation of the diabolism, let alone the Yinma clan. Such a person could be killed by the people of the righteous martial arts world, but he couldn't die in the hands of his own people. The entire Devil Dao was originally divided into the Bright Devil and the Hidden Devil lineage. Moreover, the Hidden Devil lineage was not united. If there was a matter of people killing each other, then they would lose all their face. Therefore, it was fine for Yuan Tianfang to kill Chu Xiu, but he had to wait until Chu Xiu was no longer so eye-catching. Even Wei Shuya and the others were disappointed in him. Then, he could kill Chu Xiu without any worries. However, Yuan Tianfang thought about it carefully. With Chu Xiu's strength and the potential he had displayed, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to wait for that day. After all, he wasn't young anymore. The more Yuan Tianfang thought about it, the more he couldn't take it lying down. So, he personally brought a few of his disciples from the northern Yan land to cause trouble for Chu Xiu. Of course, Yuan Tianfang was not going to kill Chu Xiu directly. If he could, he would have done it long ago. Yuan Tianfang was planning to push Chu Xiu out of the way, so much so that he had no place to stand in the northern Yan. At this moment, a dissatisfied rebuke was suddenly heard. I say, what are you guys doing? If you don't want to go, then get out of the way. A good dog doesn't block the way, understand? Yuan Tianfang and the others were standing at the city gate, seemingly blocking the way of a small family's caravan into the city. Others could take a detour, but the small family's caravan had a lot of vehicles, so they couldn't go around it. At this time, in front of the caravan, a young man was pointing at Yuan Tianfang and scolding him, looking extremely impatient. A steward beside him wanted to stop him. After all, it was better to avoid trouble when they were outside. It was not good to cause trouble, but his hands were not as fast as the young man's mouth. Yuan Tianfang turned around and glanced at the young man expressionlessly. It was this glance that caused the young man's face to immediately reveal an expression of endless fear, as if he had seen something extremely terrifying. The other people in the caravan didn't feel anything, but they didn't dare to move a step. Yuan Tianfang turned back and walked into Yanjing City with his disciples. At this time, the caravan finally dared to move, as if the paralysis spell had been lifted. Young master, young master. The manager of the merchant group pulled on the young man who was still in a daze. However, in the next moment, the young man's entire body seemed to have melted. His bones, flesh, and blood all turned into a pile of mud. Only a piece of human skin with a terrified expression was left behind. This immediately caused a wave of terrified screams. Yuan Tianfang walked on the street and snorted, "Barbarians have no manners at all. Can't you even say please? Where is the palace? Take me to see Xiang Long." It was difficult for others to see the Northern Yan Emperor, but it was very easy for an expert of Yuan Tianfang's level. He directly stood at the gate of the palace and released a bit of his true fire spirit refinement realm aura. Immediately, experts from the palace came out to ask about it, and then respectfully welcomed him into the palace. In a hall in the palace, Xiang Long looked down at Yuan Tianfang and said in a deep voice, "May I know why Mr. Yuan has come to the Northern Yan?" The name, 10 Directions Old Demon Yuan Tianfang was still very famous in the martial world. The moment Yuan Tianfang appeared, someone had already handed over all his information to Xianglong. As for Yuan Tianfang's sudden visit, Xianglong was also confused and didn't know why. Yuan Tianfang was from the Central Plains. After being humiliated in western Chu's Longhu Mountain, he spent most of his time in the East Pole Mountain near the East Bay. He wouldn't go out unless there was something important, and he rarely came to the northern Yen. Yuan Tianfang didn't even raise his head. He said indifferently, "I'm not used to talking to people with my head up." For an expert like Yuan Tianfang who had reached the true fire spirit refinement realm, the world's imperial power was bullshit. Even the current northern Yen and eastern Qi were great countries in the world. For a small country like the Wei Kingdom, the predecessor of Wei County, Yuan Tianfang, as an expert of the true fire spirit refinement realm, could easily destroy a country. Therefore, he treated Xianglong the same way he treated the leaders of some great forces, or even worse. Because those leaders at least had some strength, but Xianglong didn't even have the strength. Yuan Tianfang could crush him with one finger. Of course, the reason he didn't crush him was that in the northern Yen court, there were also experts who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. For example, as soon as he said that, he felt several auras shrouding him. Xianglong waved his hand and said indifferently, "Mr. Yuan is right. It'll be easier to talk if we're closer." With that, Xianglong walked down the high platform and sat opposite Yuan Tianfang. He said in a deep voice again, "I wonder why Mr. Yuan has come to the northern Yen this time." This time, Yuan Tianfang nodded with satisfaction and said, "I have come to deal with Chu Xiu. He killed my disciple. This matter can't be settled like this." Xianglong frowned slightly. Just as Yuan Tianfang didn't like Xianglong who could control such a great power, Xianglong also didn't like the boring grudges and vendettas in Jianghu. Therefore, Xianglong said directly, "Mr. Yuan, if you have a grudge against Chu Xiu, then you can go directly to Chu Xiu. Why have you come to the northern Yen palace? Moreover, Mr. Yuan, do you know that Chu Xiu is the governor of the northern Yen Jianghu Hall? Are you telling me this because you want me to help you kill Chu Xiu? I can't kill my own subjects as I please." Yuan Tianfang snorted and said, "What is the Jianghu Hall? It's just a child's play. In short, I want Chu Xiu to have no place in the entire northern Yen. Get rid of him and your Jianghu Hall will be supported by I. Whether you want to use this old man or that Chu Xiu bastard, you better think carefully before you speak." Hearing Yuan Tianfang's words, Xianglong's eyes suddenly lit up. Yuan Tianfang was an expert in the true fire spirit refinement realm. Although the northern Yen imperial court also had a few experts of this level, no one would complain about having too many of them. Most importantly, Xianglong gradually felt that he seemed to be unable to suppress Chu Xiu. The Jianghu Hall was an institution of the imperial court in name, but in fact, it was Chu Xiu's own people. Including those martial arts forces, they did not surrender to the northern Yen imperial court, but to the Jianghu Hall. The people of the pugilistic world were always people of the pugilistic world. It was too difficult to make them completely his subjects. Moreover, what Chu Xiu did this time also made Xianglong somewhat dissatisfied. The little tricks that Chu Xiu played did indeed open up the Jianghu Hall in the bitter and cold land of the extreme north, but this was not enough. Xianglong's real intention was to let the Yinma clan behind Chu Xiu fight with the Great Guangming Temple. As a result, Chu Xiu made such a move. He had an excuse, but the Great Guangming Temple did not really make a move. This was too far from Xianglong's plan. However, he could not directly tell Chu Xiu that he was using him to fight with the Great Guangming Temple. In that case, both sides would directly shed all pretense of cordiality. Originally, Xianglong placed Daoist Wuyang into the Jianghu Hall to suppress Chu Xiu. As a result, it seemed that this Daoist Wuyang was too useless. He was so frightened by Chu Xiu that he did not dare to show his face, let alone fight with Chu Xiu. Now, the appearance of this Yuan Tianfang gave Xiang Long a very good choice. After pondering for a while, he said, "If this is the case, I will appoint Mr. Yuan as the Jianghu Hall's Grand Elder, the same level as Chu Xiu. What do you think? However, the imperial court is fair. The position is given to you, but the imperial court will not favor you or Chu Xiu for other things." Yuan Tianfang curled his lips and said, "You people like to do these useless things. I do not need you to favor me." After saying that, Yuan Tianfang turned and left directly. He did not even say goodbye. Xiang Long looked at Yuan Tianfang's back without the slightest expression on his face. At this time, an old eunuch walked out from the darkness and whispered, "Your Majesty, this Yuan Tianfang is not a good person. This person had a feud with Taoism in the early years. Countless Taoism masters died in his hands. If it was not for Dragon Tiger Mountain that finally scared him away, this person's reputation would probably be even worse." Xiang Long said lightly, "Don't worry, I also know the depth. If this Yuan Tianfang was another Chu Xiu, I might not dare to use him. However, this person is a standard demonic villain. He is powerful and cruel, but he acts crazily, does not use his brain, and does not know propriety. There are only two endings for such a person. One is to be killed in the early stage, and the other is to become stronger in the killing and become a true demonic villain. This Yuan Tianfang is the latter. I dare to use such a person. On the contrary, I do not want a second person like Chu Xiu to appear." Chapter 794. Chu Xiu didn't know what was happening in Yanjing City. He only had 3 months. At the very least, he had to use these 3 months to find all 3 of Lu Jianghu's buried treasures. Chu Xiu was so angry that his teeth were itching. He didn't know if Lu Jianghu did it on purpose, but finding the 3 places was like trying his luck. He had found one by accident, but he hadn't found the other 2. When he asked Lu Jianghu, he said that it had been 500 years and that he was sleeping. How could he remember so clearly? Moreover, the places where the blood of the experts was buried had a mark left by Lu Jianghu himself. In his words, if his body was still there, he would be able to feel it even with his eyes closed. Of course, he didn't have to remember it so clearly. After digging for a month, Shen Feiying hurriedly came back to report, "Sir, we have dug up an underground palace. However, it seems to be a little different from the first underground palace. The method you gave us to break the formation is also unable to do so." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. He finally found it. Fortunately, there were no problems this time, and he got the things smoothly. Speaking of which, Chu Xiu had a feeling that his luck wasn't too good. People like Lu Fengxian were sitting at home and treasures fell from the sky. This was called luck. Looking at Chu Xiu, he had never been nimble in doing anything. Things that he thought were in the bag would suddenly have some accidents. This time, it was finally neat and tidy. "Bring me there." When Shen Feiying brought Chu Xiu over, the family heads and sect leaders of the major forces were all there. Seeing everyone's eager eyes, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Everyone, the things in this underground palace are a little sensitive, so we won't share them with you. There is still one more underground palace that we haven't excavated. Everyone, please continue to work hard, and the things inside will be shared equally." Although Chu Xiu had said at the beginning that there were only 2 underground palaces with hidden treasures, everyone could tell with one look that the things in this underground palace were the real treasures. However, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that the items in the underground palace were the real treasures. They were so precious that Chu Xiu was unwilling to share them with everyone else. But since Chu Xiu said so, everyone present didn't dare to say anything even if they were envious. Competing with Chu Xiu for treasures was simply courting death. Lu Jianghu transmitted a secret method to Chu Xiu in his mind. After opening the formation, Chu Xiu asked Shen Feiying to guard the door with his men while he entered the underground palace. Because this underground palace only preserved the blood of the experts, it wasn't too big, only the size of a house. The formation in the center automatically absorbed the surrounding power of heaven and earth, using it to nourish the blood inside, making the martial Dao true meaning even more powerful. Chu Xiu looked up and saw two boxes floating in the middle of the formation. One of the boxes had several small compartments, each with a scarlet drop of blood, exuding different auras. Some were shining with Buddha's light, and some were surging with sword qi. The other box only had a drop of blood, and it didn't emit any aura. It looked very ordinary, very ordinary. But the magical thing was that when Chu Xiu closed his eyes, he couldn't feel the existence of that drop of blood. It was as if it only existed in Chu Xiu's eyes and didn't exist in this world. Lu Jiang, he said excitedly, it seems that the nourishment of the blood here is very successful. Kid, you got lucky. I'll teach you the blood shadow great technique now. You just need to absorb and refine these blood beads according to the method above. Oh yes, don't forget to keep the blood bead of the Palace Master of 7 Absolute Palace for me. As he said that, Lu Jiang he directly taught it to Chu Xiu through his mental strength. Lu Jiang he didn't hide anything from him. Anyway, he was in such a state now, so there was no need to hide anything. In fact, the blood shadow great technique was very simple. It should be said that it wasn't a cultivation method, but a way of using the blood divine demonic technique. In the blood soul bead, Lu Jiang he waved his hand, and countless blood shadows flew around him quickly. Looking carefully, these blood shadows turned out to be different human shapes. Some were holding sabers, and some were using swords. Tens of thousands of martial paths fused into the blood shadow, and its power was quite shocking. Chu Xiu almost understood that this blood shadow great technique was actually using the power of blood and qi, and then using the blood of these former powerhouses as a guide. It simulated a part of the other party's power in the past. Although it was only a part, the strength of these powerhouses in the past was indeed very strong. If all of them were simulated, the power must be extremely terrifying without even thinking about it. Chu Xiu placed the drop of blood belonging to the Palace Master of 7 Absolute Palace on the blood soul bead, and it was instantly swallowed by the blood soul bead. After swallowing the drop of blood, Lu Jiang he's remnant soul also became more solid, and there was a qualitative change. On the other hand, Chu Xiu began to refine the blood beads one by one with the blood shadow great technique. In an instant, the sword intent on Chu Xiu's body soared into the sky, the Buddha's light filled the air, and the power of various attributes kept erupting in his body, which made Chu Xiu couldn't help but let out a few muffled groans. The blood shadow great technique only had one bottleneck, and it had to be combined with the blood and qi of these former powerhouses, completely refining it into one's own power. But these powerhouses were characters who could be ranked on the sovereign list in the past, and even the power left behind by a drop of blood couldn't be underestimated. Therefore, if a weaker cultivator came here, it was estimated that they would first explode before they could practice the blood shadow great technique. Fortunately, with Chu Xiu's strength, this step was only a little tricky for him, so it wasn't too difficult. Therefore, Chu Xiu successfully refined all the blood beads. After refining these blood beads, Chu Xiu turned his eyes to Dugu Weiwei's drop of blood. At this time, Lu Jiang he suddenly said, "Hey, boy, you'd better be careful. This is a drop of the sect master's blood, and it's not the same as the others. If you want to forcibly refine it, I'm afraid that something will happen to this lord." It can be said that even if this lord was at his peak, this lord wouldn't dare to so rashly refine a drop of the sect master's blood. Chu Xiu was surprised and said, "Oh, you actually care about me? If something happens to me, shouldn't you be the happiest one?" Lu Jiang he curled his lips and said, "Boy, don't be unappreciative of my kindness. This lord is reminding you. Cooperating with you, boy, this lord can at least get some benefits. But if you die, and the blood soul bead is taken by those idiots outside, maybe this lord will be like in the hands of those earth demon hall bastards, sleeping all day. Before, Lu Jianghe was indeed a little resistant to Chu Xiu, but later he found that this boy, Chu Xiu, was somewhat in line with his temperament. Most importantly, he could see the benefits of being together with Chu Xiu. This guy's luck really wasn't very good, always running into all kinds of trouble. But after these troubles, there were always some benefits. Just like that nine-tailed heavenly fox's remnant soul last time, and now this 7 absolute palace lord's fresh blood, these were all pretty good things. If there were benefits coming in all the time, reckon that before long, no need for Chu Xiu to let him go, he himself would be able to break this blood soul bead. Chu Xiu stared at that drop of Dugu Weiwei's fresh blood and said coolly, so what if Dugu Weiwei? Putting it aside and not using it, could it be that you still want to take it back and worship it? The Kunlun devil cult has long perished. As he said, Chu Xiu directly reached his hand towards that blood soul bead. This was not that Chu Xiu was unable to tell good from bad, but he very much wanted to know what kind of changes would occur after he refined this drop of Dugu Weiwei's fresh blood. After all, from this period of experience, Chu Xiu also knew that his involvement with Dugu Weiwei was somewhat too deep. When Lu Jianghe saw this scene, he could not help but shake his head. Young people were just too impatient, too impatient. However, at this moment, Lu Jianghe suddenly opened his eyes wide. He saw that drop of Dugu Weiwei's fresh blood directly integrated into Chu Xiu's body, without the slightest obstruction. In an instant, Lu Jianghe's mental strength was directly kicked out of Chu Xiu's body, and he could no longer communicate with Chu Xiu. Moreover, an extremely pure demonic aura bloomed from Chu Xiu's body. That was the purest demonic aura, containing no impurities. If there was clarity, there would be turbidity. If there was yin, there would be yang. If there was righteousness, there would naturally be demons. That demonic aura integrated the negative forces of this world into one, and it itself was a part of heaven and earth. A natural demon, known as a heavenly demon. Indestructible heavenly demon book. Lu Jianghe instantly lost his composure, a look of disbelief flashing in his eyes. The power on Chu Xiu's body now belonged to Dugu Weiwei's power in the past. In the entire pugilistic world, only Dugu Weiwei cultivated this shocking and powerful demonic art. A natural demon, coexisting with the world. The people of the world clamored to exterminate demons, but they did not know that if there were no demons, then what was the point of the righteous path's existence? Therefore, this demon was a force that inevitably existed between heaven and earth, coexisting with the world, immortal and indestructible. The indestructible heavenly demon book created by Dugu Weiwei was precisely to cultivate this shocking and powerful martial Tao true meaning. When it reached the grand accomplishment stage, it could be said to be truly immortal and indestructible, coexisting with the world. As long as the world existed, the demon would also exist, and he would have an immortal body. However, this kind of thing was too shocking, even its creator, Dugu Weiwei, had not cultivated it to the extreme peak. However, Lu Jianghe was extremely familiar with this kind of power. This was definitely the power that belonged to Dugu Weiwei, and it was not brought about by that drop of blood. What was left in the blood was the martial Tao true meaning, not this kind of pure power. But, how could it appear on Chu Xiu's body? Looking at Chu Xiu's whole body wrapped in pure demonic qi, Lu Jianghe had a thoughtful look on his face, but he could not figure it out no matter how hard he tried. He suddenly realized that he seemed to have never clearly seen through this kid. Previously, Lu Jianghe thought that he was a demonic path disciple who had obtained a part of Dugu Weiwei's inheritance. After all, he was from the Immortal lineage. But like the indestructible heavenly demon book, Dugu Weiwei had never spread it out, and he had never accepted a disciple. This Chu Xiu had too many secrets, so many that even he could not see through them. Chapter 795. Darkness, Scarlet, Silence, and oblivion. Chu Xiu was surrounded by such an environment. The darkness was oppressive, the scarlet was sinister, and the silence was eerie. In the end, he sank into oblivion. At this moment, everything around him suddenly lit up. However, after it lit up, Chu Xiu suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. It wasn't that Chu Xiu was making a fuss about nothing, but the world in front of him was simply too frightening. Even Chu Xiu's worldview was refreshed. At this moment, he seemed to be on a boundless sea, but what flowed beneath his feet was murky yellow sewage, emitting a pungent stench. There were 3 full moons in the sky. Although there were 3 moons, their brightness was extremely dim. The strangest thing was that the 3 moons were scarlet. Of course, what was even stranger was that Chu Xiu was currently standing on the back of a huge skeleton. The skeleton was humanoid and over 30 meters tall. It had already decayed into a skeleton. But what exactly was this thing? Was it a giant or an ancient demon god? At this moment, the murky yellow surface of the water began to churn. Countless ferocious evil spirits and evil spirits hid under the surface, constantly churning and wailing. A scarlet color rose from the murky yellow surface of the murky yellow water, and a white bone throne that shone with an evil light was lifted by the sea of blood. A figure was sitting on the white bone throne. He was clearly wearing a black robe, but he shone with a glaring, ferocious bloody light. The moment he saw this person, Chu Xiu's expression changed. Dugu Weiwei. This person's appearance was exactly the same as the Dugu Weiwei that Chu Xiu had seen in the illusion. Chu Xiu wanted to remember his appearance so that he could ask Lu Jianghu when he got out. However, for some reason, even though this person was clearly in front of him, Chu Xiu couldn't describe his appearance completely. He couldn't even remember it in his heart. You are resisting. Dugu Weiwei, who was sitting on the white bone throne, suddenly opened his mouth. Under the murky yellow water surface, the countless evil ghosts and vengeful spirits suddenly fell silent, as if they were afraid of this person. Chu Xiu's expression changed slightly. Although this was not the first time he had seen Dugu Weiwei, the previous few times he had seen Dugu Weiwei should have been a projection left behind by Dugu Weiwei. This time, however, the other party seemed to have a real thought. When you learn that your existence is a mystery, don't you resist? I just want to ask, who am I? Chu Xiu gazed at Dugu Weiwei and voiced out the biggest question in his heart. Only a lunatic or an idiot could ask such a question as who am I? Chu Xiu was neither crazy nor stupid. He was just a person involved in the situation, unable to see through the fog in front of him. You are me, and I am you. Me, it's us. Chu Xiu frowned and said, what do you mean? Am I your reincarnation, or a body that you have taken over? A smile appeared on Dugu Weiwei's face. As long as Heaven's will is not defeated, the demon master will not die. As long as you are not dead, I will not be defeated. Since I am not dead, how can I reincarnate? I will not take over my own body either. There is no need to resist. When you reach the peak, you will naturally see me. I will be waiting for you here. Dugu Weiwei's words caused Chu Xiu to frown. If he was not reincarnated or taken over, then what was he? Chu Xiu suddenly raised his head and said coldly, as long as I am not dead, you will not be defeated. What if I die now? Dugu Weiwei suddenly laughed loudly. Die? You can't bear to die. I have said before, you are me. Using your own life to threaten yourself, I will not do such a stupid thing, and you will not do the same. After laughing, Dugu Weiwei retracted his smile. There is not much time left. I can only leave this much in this drop of blood. This is a seed left for you. Chu Xiu's expression changed slightly. You have calculated that Lu Jianghu will fall into my hands 500 years later? You can know what will happen 500 years later? Dugu Weiwei said indifferently, Heaven's son gazing at Qi, killing while talking. You use the heaven's sun gazing at Qi to see people, but the real heaven's sun gazing at Qi sees the world. I can see everything in the world, but I only use it to look at Lu Jianghu. Can't I see through him? Otherwise, do you think Lu Jianghu would be able to obtain this drop of blood 500 years ago? At this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly understood many things. Was everything that he saw after transmigrating really the future? Relying on his foresight, Chu Xiu obtained many things. He obtained the glazed golden thread Gu and the heaven's sun gazing at Qi. But the more time passed, the more vague his memories of the future became. Now, Chu Xiu seemed to have understood that the so-called future might not be real, and might not always happen. The future that he saw was only the future that someone deduced, making him think that this was the real future. Chu Xiu still wanted to say something, but Dugu Weiwei said, "Time is up, I will wait for you here." The moment he said that, 3 blood moons fell from the sky. In the turbid yellow river, raging waves surged and tore apart countless evil spirits and ghosts. The entire space instantly collapsed. When Chu Xiu's mind returned to the underground palace, Lu Jianghu was hiding in the blood soul bead, looking at Chu Xiu with vigilance. "Who are you? Are you really the reincarnation of Patriarch Dugu?" The power that burst out in that instant was definitely the power of the indestructible heavenly demon book. It was the power that belonged exclusively to Patriarch Dugu. Thinking that this lad's appearance was exactly the same as Patriarch Dugu's Earth Soul incarnation, Lu Jianghu also had some doubts about Chu Xiu's identity. Chu Xiu was also looking at Lu Jianghu at this moment. To speak the truth, he felt some pity for this guy. This guy had been trapped for 500 years, maybe from the start. Dugu Weiwei had done it on purpose. The value of his existence was that he thought he was smart enough to obtain a drop of Dugu Weiwei's blood, but then he did a stupid thing and was trapped for 500 years. Until now, he gave Chu Xiu a drop of blood, or as Dugu Weiwei called it, a seed. At first, Chu Xiu was still doubtful. Dugu Weiwei's temper seemed to be quite bad, but now it seemed that all of this was a trap. He remembered that the ancestor of the Shadow Mountain sect, Daoist Wu Wang, was once a member of the Kunlun Devil cult. After he betrayed the Kunlun Devil cult, he was not completely eliminated by Dugu Weiwei. Although Lu Jianghu was a little stupid and said something he shouldn't have, it was a little too harsh to have his physical body destroyed and sealed. It turned out that all of this was planned. Looking at Lu Jianghu, Chu Xiu said calmly, "All right, I admit it. I am Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation. Seeing that the cult master is here, why aren't you kneeling down and telling me all of your secrets?" Lu Jianghu choked all of a sudden, with an expression of, "I'd be a fool to believe you." If Chu Xiu continued to be secretive, he might have some doubts, but now that Chu Xiu said it like this, he didn't believe it. Of course, he also had doubts, but if Chu Xiu didn't say it, he couldn't do anything. After going out, Chu Xiu directly cultivated in the floating snow city in the extreme north for a while. He wanted to familiarize himself with the blood shadow technique, and Dugu Weiwei said that he left a seed in his body. Chu Xiu didn't know what this so-called seed was. Anyway, he didn't feel any changes in his body. However, just as Chu Xiu began his retreat, there were already changes in the Jianghu hall. Yuan Tianfang's character was almost the same as that of his disciple, Xing Situ, who died in the hands of Chu Xiu. He was sinister, vicious, and crazy. He was a standard devil. The only difference from Xing Situ was that Yuan Tianfang was, after all, a big boss of the Yinma clan. He still had some general situation and vision. Xing Situ had a whim to frame Chu Xiu at such a critical moment in the war between the righteous and the devil. Yuan Tianfang wouldn't have done that. Of course, this didn't mean that Yuan Tianfang would be soft-hearted. At this time, after receiving Xiang Long's order, Yuan Tianfang immediately let his disciple take over the Jianghu hall. Back in the Devil Cliff Cave of the East Pole Mountain, Yuan Tianfang accepted a lot of disciples, but in fact, most of his disciples were just for fun. There were only a few who could inherit his true inheritance. Xing Situ was one, and this time, the disciple he found in the northern Yen, Duanjiao, was another. Duanjiao looked like a wretched thief, but in fact, he was the first among Yuan Tianfang's disciples to step into the martial Dao Grand Master realm. He also made a name for himself in the northern Yen Wulin as the Blood Soul Demon Hand. Yuan Tianfang had cultivated countless devil skills in his life. Duanjiao didn't inherit all of Yuan Tianfang's skills. He only inherited a martial art that could extract human blood and spirit. It was said that its origin could even be traced back to the strongest hall under the Kunlun devil cult, the Blood Demon Hall. It was very powerful. This time, Yuan Tianfang came to the northern Yen to avenge Xing Situ, and Duanjiao could be said to be the most active one. He didn't care who killed Xing Situ. He was even a little jealous of Xing Situ. It was obvious that he was the first to become Yuan Tianfang's disciple. In the end, among Yuan Tianfang's many disciples, Xing Situ was the most favored one. Why? Therefore, Duanjiao had no interest in avenging Xing Situ at all. He had been in the northern Yen for many years, but after learning that Xing Situ had died in the hands of Chu Xiu, he didn't even show his face. This was enough to show his standpoint and thoughts. This time, Duanjiao was so active only because Xing Situ was dead. It could be said that he was the most outstanding among Yuan Tianfang's many disciples. As long as he served Yuan Tianfang well, Yuan Tianfang's inheritance of skills and all kinds of secret treasures would be his. With this thought in mind, Duanjiao directly strode into the Jianghu Hall and shouted, "Is there anyone in charge in the Jianghu Hall? Come out and greet me." Several martial artists guarding the door just wanted to stop him, but they were blown aside by Duanjiao. At this time, Pang Hu walked out with a long saber in his hand and snorted coldly. "Who dares to cause trouble in the Jianghu Hall?" Mei Qinglian came out behind Pang Hu. When she saw Duanjiao, her expression couldn't help but change slightly. She wanted to stop Pang Hu, but it was too late. With Pang Hu's bad temper, he was already fighting with Duanjiao. Chapter 796. Mei Qinglian recognized Duanjiao, who was also very famous among Yuan Tianfang's disciples. However, no matter how famous he was, Duanjiao could not be compared to Chu Xiu, let alone the entire Jianghu Hall. The Jianghu Hall had been established in the entire northern Yen for a long time, but Duanjiao did not even dare to show his face. Mei Qinglian was very clear about what his sudden appearance here meant. If it was just Duanjiao, he would not have the guts to provoke the Jianghu Hall. What Mei Qinglian was really worried about was Yuan Tianfang, who was behind Duanjiao. At this time, Pang Hu had already exchanged blows with Duanjiao. Within a few moves, Pang Hu had already gained the upper hand. There were also differences in strength between martial Dao Grand Masters. Some people, even if they became martial arts masters, were unknown, while some people were ranked on the Fengyun list and stirred up the Jianghu. Although Duanjiao was a martial arts master, he did not receive the true teachings of Yuan Tianfang. His strength could only be said to be passable among martial artists of the same level. Pang Hu, on the other hand, was one of the 36 northern bandits who had experienced countless hunts. The strength of the two could not be compared at all. Just as Duanjiao was at a disadvantage, a cold snort was suddenly heard. Dark clouds gathered in mid-air, and a giant demonic hand stretched out from the vortex, smashing Pang Hu's saber momentum and causing him to vomit blood and retreat. Mei Qinglian's expression changed. Demonic mist surged in her hands, wanting to catch Pang Hu, but she was also forced to retreat by the strong force. At this time, Lu Fengxian appeared beside Mei Qinglian. The two of them joined forces to catch Pang Hu, who was seriously injured and vomiting blood. As Yuan Tianfang stepped into the Jianghu Hall with many disciples, the martial artists in the Jianghu Hall suddenly had a change of expression. This was a powerhouse in the true fire spirit refinement realm. In the past, the Jianghu Hall had also been attacked by a powerhouse in the true fire spirit refinement realm. That person was Fang Jinwu. However, at that time, Chu Xiu was there, but now that Chu Xiu was not there, who could they find to take over? It had to be said that Chu Xiu rarely took action in the suppression martial hall, and even Chu Xiu was too lazy to care about some of the details. However, Chu Xiu's position in the Jianghu Hall was absolutely like a pillar. Lu Fengxian frowned and was about to rush out with halberd. Lu Fengxian had the courage to attack even when facing a true fire spirit refinement realm expert. However, Mei Qinglian pulled LV Fengxian back, not letting him do anything stupid. Not everyone was like Chu Xiu, who dared to kill the existence of the real fire spirit refinement state at the real pellet state. Mei Qinglian frowned and said, "Senior Yuan, what do you mean by this? Are you deliberately looking for trouble? You are a senior of the Yinma clan, so you should naturally know what the Jianghu Hall represents. It is also the interest of the entire Yinma clan. If you come to take revenge because of some personal grudges, will you ignore the rules of the Yinma clan?" Yuan Tianfang sneered and said, "That girl from the Yin Demon sect is quite sharp-tongued, just like those seniors of yours. Listen carefully, I didn't come to take revenge, but to fight for more benefits for my Yinma clan. I had already asked Xiang Long for a position as the Great Elder of the Jianghu Hall, which is not inferior to Chu Xiu. It just so happens that Chu Xiu is not here, so now, the Jianghu Hall is under I's management. Yin Demon sect's little girl, I advise you not to hang yourself on a tree. Chu Xiu won't be stable for long." Yuan Tianfang was relatively polite to Mei Qinglian. In the past, Yin Demon sect was definitely regarded as a big sect in the entire Yinma clan. It was an extremely powerful branch. If Yin Demon sect was still here, its power would not even lose to the current phaseless demon sect. Moreover, even if the Yin Demon ancestor was no longer around, the connections that the Yin Demon ancestor had accumulated in the past were still there. These connections did not only refer to Wei Shuya. Therefore, Yuan Tianfang would not touch Mei Qinglian unless he completely fell out with her. With a wave of his hand, Yuan Tianfang's disciples and grand disciples all entered the Jianghu Hall. Some of these people were his personal disciples, and some were his grand disciples. On the contrary, all of them looked strange and ferocious. They didn't look like good people at first glance. Chu Xiu is not here. Now the Jianghu Hall is under I's management. Yin Demon sect's little girl, be sensible and leave with the others. There were many martial Dao masters in the Jianghu Hall, but Pang, who had been seriously injured. Lu Hongya's strength in the real pellet state could only be regarded as mediocre. Only Lu Fengxian and her were left. How could they fight? So she stopped the angry Lu Fengxian, and Mei Qinglian said in a deep voice, "Okay, since Senior Yuan is willing to share the pressure of the Jianghu Hall, then we will give it to you." After speaking, Mei Qinglian waved her hand and led everyone back into the Jianghu Hall. Seeing this scene, Duan Jiao immediately came over and smiled apologetically, "Master is indeed master." With one move and one word, he made those people retreat. However, this time Duan Jiao's flattery hit the horse's leg. Yuan Tianfang directly slapped Duan Jiao, causing him to stagger. He then snorted coldly, "Look at how much your strength has regressed after all these years of slacking off on your cultivation. Pang, who is just a casual martial artist who used to be a bandit. In the end, you didn't even have the slightest strength to fight back. You might as well die." Duan Jiao felt wronged but did not dare to refute. Pang, who was one of the 36 northern bandits. In his early years, his strength was already not weak. Moreover, although Pang, who also came from an unorthodox background, he had his own cultivation martial path. How could he be like Duan Jiao, who did not even learn some of his master's special skills and still had to be beaten in the end? Yuan Tianfang snorted coldly and said, "Bring the others and take over the Jianghu Hall." If you can't even do such a small thing, then what use do I have for you? Duan Zhuo nodded repeatedly and immediately brought people to deal with the matter. Of course, the so-called handling was just taking it for granted. They could just do whatever they wanted. Although Duan Zhuo had a master, he had long finished his apprenticeship and came to the northern Yen to make a living. Although he had strength, in fact, his ability was the same as a casual martial artist. As for his fellow apprentices and disciples, they were all the same. It was already considered good that they did not cause any trouble. Lu Fengxian was pulled back to the room by Mei Qinglian, while Pang Hu was sent to miracle Dr. Feng Buping for treatment. Senior Mei, why did you pull me just now? Even if we are no match for Yuan Tianfang, we can't just watch him take away Brother Chu's foundation so easily, right? Mei Qinglian patted Lu Fengxian and snorted lightly, why do you call me senior? Don't you know that women don't like to be called senior? Call me sister. After lecturing Lu Fengxian, who had a straight EQ, Mei Qinglian said, don't be impulsive. Do you think this old guy is a vegetarian? He spared Pang Hu's life and didn't make a move against me because he was still worried about his identity as a member of the hidden devil lineage. On the contrary, if we really infuriate him, with this old guy's character, we can't be sure what he will do. At that time, besides running for our lives, we can't even stay in the Jianghu Hall. To fight with this old guy, we still have to rely on Chu Xiu. The key is to call him back as soon as possible. Lu Fengxian frowned and said, we are both from the hidden devil lineage, yet Yuan Tianfang dares to do such a thing. Isn't he afraid of Senior Wei Shuya's anger? Mei Qinglian shook her head gently. Lu Fengxian was not a member of the hidden devil lineage. She did not know how serious the intrigue in the hidden devil lineage was. If it was an ordinary matter, Wei Shuya could completely suppress it. But this time, Chu Xiu had killed his most beloved disciple. Wei Shuya could suppress it for a while, but he could not suppress it for a lifetime. As a matter of fact, Yuan Tianfang had come to the door. Moreover, it was already beyond Mei Qinglian's expectations that Yuan Tianfang could endure for such a long time. Lu Fengxian did not ask too much about this matter. He just said, in that case, I will inform Brother Chu. Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, there is no need for you to make a trip. The hidden devil lineage also has many secret communication methods. There is a communication formation in the floating snow city in the extreme north. Just now, I have already instructed Tangya to secretly send it over. Now, Chu Xiu should have received the news. Originally, Chu Xiu planned to retreat in the floating snow city in the extreme north for a period of time. However, on the second day, Bai Wuji hurried over and handed Chu Xiu the news from the Jianghu Hall. After reading what was said, Chu Xiu's expression suddenly became gloomy. Courting death. Yuan Tianfang was courting death. Xiang Long was also courting death. It was normal for Yuan Tianfang to want revenge, but Xiang Long was also adding fuel to the fire. It seemed that he really wanted to play the trick of cooking the hound after the hare was killed. The Jianghu Hall was the foundation that Chu Xiu had developed with great efforts. He would not just sit back and watch Yuan Tianfang destroy the Jianghu Hall. Therefore, after instructing Bai Wuji to let the others leave after 3 months, Chu Xiu immediately returned to the Jianghu Hall. In the few days that Chu Xiu rushed back to the Jianghu Hall, Yuan Tianfang's men had already made a mess in the Jianghu Hall. What was the responsibility of the Jianghu Hall? For Xiang Long, the Jianghu Hall was responsible for suppressing the Northern Yen martial arts world, making it safe and stable, and not causing trouble for the imperial court. For Chu Xiu, the Jianghu Hall was to make the Northern Yen martial arts world forces, large and small, surrender to the Jianghu Hall. While reducing losses, they would offer offerings to the Jianghu Hall in exchange for protection and profit. What were Yuan Tianfang's men doing? They acted recklessly, blackmailed the major forces, did not follow any rules, and acted completely according to their own preferences. In just a few days, the forces that were originally under the Jianghu Hall had been miserable. Most of these forces were not so close to the Jianghu Hall. They did not choose to surrender to the Jianghu Hall before, so they stayed here and did not go to the bitter and cold land of the extreme north. But now it seemed that it was better for them to be sent to the bitter and cold land of the extreme north to dig things. At least it was better than now. Therefore, after Chu Xiu returned to Yanjing City, before he returned to the Jianghu Hall, a group of masters of large and small forces surrounded him and complained about all kinds of grievances. Looking at those people, Chu Xiu said faintly, "Everyone, when I was here, you were not willing to join the Jianghu Hall, and you even clamored that I, Chu Xiu, was cruel. Now you can see that I am cruel because I want you to follow the rules. Have you experienced the consequences of not following the rules?" Chapter 797. Sometimes, people were so despicable. When someone was around, they would gnash their teeth in hatred. However, when someone else was around and their situation became worse, they would start to miss that person. That was how everyone present felt at the moment. Although Chu Xiu did things cruelly, there were rules. At the very least, he would leave you a way out. However, Yuan Tianfang's disciples and grand disciples didn't care about anything and really forced you onto the path of death. Chu Xiu did not care about them. He shook off the crowd and stepped into the Jianghu Hall. Inside the Jianghu Hall, even the gatekeepers were replaced by Yuan Tianfang's disciples and disciples. Seeing that Chu Xiu was about to enter the Jianghu Hall, someone immediately scolded and intercepted him. "How dare you? Do you know where this is? How dare you barge in?" Yuan Tianfang's disciples and disciples could be considered to have been transferred home. Yuan Tianfang came for Chu Xiu, but this group of small fries did not know what was going on. They did not even recognize Chu Xiu. With a cold snort, Chu Xiu's body flashed with a bloody light. The martial artist immediately seemed to be smashed by a heavy hammer. He hit a wall and fell to the ground. "How dare you? Who dares to cause trouble in my Jianghu Hall?" Duan Jiao walked out and could not help but be stunned when he saw Chu Xiu coming back. Shouldn't this guy be fighting to the death with the Great Light Temple in the bitter north? Why did he come back so quickly? "Your Jianghu Hall. I'll let you say it again. Which Jianghu Hall is it?" Chu Xiu looked at Duan Jiao. The aura around him seemed to condense into a substance. It was like a black cloud pressing down on a city, almost making Duan Jiao breathless. In Duan Jiao's eyes, there seemed to be a sea of blood behind Chu Xiu. The powerful pressure penetrated deep into his soul and made him tremble. In Chu Xiu's mind, Lu Jiang he sneered and said, "It turns out that he is just a trash who has learned a little of the Blood Demon Hall's cultivation method. Chu Xiu, you can kill him in 3 moves." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "You think too highly of him. He's lucky to be able to survive that one move." At this moment, Duan Jiao's heart was filled with fear. He wanted to be tough, but in the end, he realized that he didn't even have the courage to curse back. Before meeting Chu Xiu, Duan Jiao was still plotting in his heart how he could help his master push Chu Xiu out of the northern Yan kingdom, so that Chu Xiu would have no place to stand. But when they met, he realized that he did not have the courage to do so. At the same real pellet state, some people could be called Wu Dao Grand Master, and some could only be a real pellet state martial artist. Duan Jiao was the latter. Although he was also a little famous in the northern Yan, compared with Chu Xiu who was famous in the martial world and even killed a real fire god refinement state powerhouse, the gap was simply too big. Moreover, although he was jealous of his junior fellow apprentice, he had to admit that Xing Situ's martial arts talent was much better than his. As a result, Xing Situ died in the hands of this Chu Xiu. What about me? Fear grew in Duan Jiao's heart. As Chu Xiu stepped out, Duan Jiao actually panicked and took a step back. He almost fell to the ground. It could be said that he was extremely embarrassed. In fact, Duanjiao was not so timid and useless. No matter what, he had been in the martial world for decades, and he even reached the real pellet state. His hands were stained with countless blood, and he even had a real fire god refinement state powerhouse as his master. But when he met Chu Xiu, he just happened to meet his nemesis. The technique he cultivated was just some corner of the old demonic blood technique. He didn't know how it spread out. What Chu Xiu cultivated was the authentic blood god demonic technique created by Lu Jianghu. To Duanjiao, this was an extremely powerful suppression. It caused the fear in his heart to be magnified 100 times. It was as if he had seen his natural enemy. Trash. Useless thing. Yuan Tianfang had already come behind Duanjiao and kicked him away. The aura around him became more violent. The surrounding weather was affected by him, and it became extremely gloomy. Chu Xiu, are you going to behave atrociously in Ai's territory? Yuan Tianfang stared at Chu Xiu with undisguised murderous intent in his eyes. Your territory? I have been running the Jianghu Hall for so long. When you come, it becomes your territory? Chu Xiu said coldly. Yuan Tianfang sneered. The identity of the Jianghu Hall's Grand Elder was given by the Northern Yan Emperor. If you are not convinced, you can reason with him. In the end, wouldn't they still be schemed against by others? No matter whose territory this is, Ai is the biggest here, so it is naturally Ai's territory. Yuan Tianfang's words were extremely explicit. He even looked down on Xiang Long and called him the Northern Yan Emperor. Of course, he really didn't put Xiang Long in his eyes. At this time, Yuan Tianfang couldn't wait for Chu Xiu to fight him in front of everyone. That way, he would have a reason. He was not looking for trouble with Chu Xiu, but Chu Xiu had offended his superior, so he had to clean up the sect. Don't think that the diabolism lineage could recklessly kill people, especially the Immortal lineage. In order to avoid losses, everyone tried to avoid being hostile with the martial artists of the same lineage, for fear that both sides would suffer. Therefore, as long as Chu Xiu still had the title of the first person in the younger generation of diabolism, Yuan Tianfang couldn't kill him openly. Otherwise, it would attract the attention of Wei Shuya and other big shots in diabolism. On the other hand, if Chu Xiu took the initiative to attack him, it would be disrespecting his superior and not understanding the rules. Even if Yuan Tianfang killed him on the spot, he would have an excuse and explanation. On this point, whether it was the sects of the righteous Tao or the diabolism, they were all the same. No matter what they did, they had to put on a dignified excuse first. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a mess if they killed indiscriminately? Staring at Yuan Tianfang, Chu Xiu's mouth suddenly curled into a smile. Yuan Tianfang, just because of that disciple of yours, you didn't go to East Pole Mountain and insisted on coming to the Northern Yan to compete with me. Is it worth it for a dead man? When Yuan Tianfang heard Chu Xiu mention Xing Situ, a murderous glint flashed across his eyes. I only had one successor that I had spent so much effort to nurture, yet he was killed by you. Don't you think it's worth it? Chu Xiu, you have Wei Shuya to protect you, so I won't kill you for the time being. However, there is still no place for you in the Northern Yan. I will now give you a choice. Destroy your own martial arts to atone for your sins. Otherwise, forcing you out of the Northern Yan is just the first step. It's not a good feeling to be targeted by a true fire spirit refinement realm expert. Duanjiao, who had been kicked away by Yuan Tianfang, felt a burst of jealousy. If Xing Situ was your successor, then what was I? Chu Xiu laughed coldly and said, don't continue to mingle in the Jianghu when you're old. All you talk is nonsense. After saying that, Chu Xiu turned and walked directly into the inner hall. Yuan Tianfang frowned. Didn't they say that Chu Xiu was insolent and impulsive? At this time, he was very calm and didn't make a move. This was somewhat unexpected to Yuan Tianfang. In the inner hall, Mei Qinglian and the others were all there. Chu Xiu's previous subordinates were also gathered here. Under Mei Qinglian's constraints, if Yuan Tianfang's people wanted to take over the Jianghu Hall, he could just let them do it. Chu Xiu was not there, so it was not appropriate to fight recklessly. Yuan Tianfang didn't dare to kill Chu Xiu, but he dared to kill the people of the Jianghu Hall. Seeing that Chu Xiu had come, Mei Qinglian said in surprise, "That's strange. You didn't make a move. I thought you were ready to fight with Yuan Tianfang, the old guy, as soon as you came back." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and shook his head. "The time is not right. I'm not sure if I make a move now. After all, the true fire spirit refinement realm is the true fire spirit refinement realm, and Yuan Tianfang's strength is not comparable to Fang Jinwu's. Even if I give Yuan Tianfang the broken intestine goo now, Yuan Tianfang's strength is estimated to be comparable to Fang Jinwu's peak. Moreover, even if I can kill Yuan Tianfang, it will also be a problem. The Immortal lineage people are not good at anything else, but they are good at meddling in other people's business and fighting among themselves. Yuan Tianfang is one of the big shots of the Immortal lineage. If I kill him now, it will be a violation of the rules." Mei Qinglian frowned and said, "If it doesn't work, then ask Senior Wei to come." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "It's useless. Yuan Tianfang got Xiang Long's fate and has an excuse. Even if Senior Wei comes, what can he do? It's nothing more than setting up a battle array and confronting him. In the end, it will definitely end in a lose-lose situation, and we will still suffer. After all, the Jianghu Hall is a force that I have run for a long time. Why would Yuan Tianfang feel distressed? It's enough to just care about destruction. There is a saying that Yuan Tianfang is right. The feeling of being targeted by a true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse is not good." Mei Qinglian and the others also furrowed their brows. It seemed like it was true. Sometimes, one's strength could really accomplish everything. Just like now, Yuan Tianfang was here to cause trouble for Chu Xiu. He didn't even have a plan, let alone a scheme. He just came to Chu Xiu's door and destroyed whatever Chu Xiu did. This made Chu Xiu feel very uncomfortable. "Then what are you going to do?" Mei Qinglian asked. Chu Xiu's eyes flashed with a cold light and said, "Wait first. We don't have the right time, the right place, and the right people. Of course, Yuan Tianfang is also the same. Most importantly, I found a problem." "What problem?" Chu Xiu said with a trace of disdain, "Yuan Tianfang is old, afraid. To put it bluntly, he is even worse than his disciple, Xing Situ. For a long time, the impression that Yuan Tianfang gave people was that of an extremely crazy demon. He killed all the 3 great Daoist sects except the Celestial Master Mansion. But from an unknown time, Yuan Tianfang's heart was full of all kinds of scruples. For example, now, if Yuan Tianfang was still so crazy, unscrupulous, and wanted to kill, then as long as he didn't care about anything, directly came to Chu Xiu, gave up his face, and launched a surprise attack on Chu Xiu. Even if Chu Xiu did not die, he could only flee. But since he had scruples and did not dare to kill Chu Xiu openly, there was a loophole. The opportunity would always come. Chapter 798. In Chu Xiu's eyes, Yuan Tianfang was old, afraid, and had misgivings in his heart. But in Yuan Tianfang's eyes, wasn't Chu Xiu the same? After returning to the Jianghu Hall, Chu Xiu immediately holed up inside, not even daring to show his face. This also made Yuan Tianfang and his subordinates more and more arrogant. They could be said to be unscrupulous. Although there were many complaints in the Jianghu, and even the Northern Yan Imperial Court had some complaints, Xiang Long did not intervene. Moreover, to Xiang Long's surprise, Chu Xiu did not appear to look for him. This made Xiang Long feel very strange. He wanted to see how long this Chu Xiu could last. However, before Xiang Long arrived, someone else had already found him. It was Daoist Wuyang. Seeing that Chu Xiu was actually still in seclusion in the Jianghu hall, Daoist Wuyang could not help but say, "I say, official Chu, that old guy Yuan Tianfang has gone too far. Aren't you going to do something about it?" Previously, when Chu Xiu was in charge of the Jianghu hall, Daoist Wuyang did not have much power, but at least his pitiful strength was not seized by Chu Xiu. Now that Yuan Tianfang was in charge of the Jianghu hall, his group of disciples had no scruples. Even the power that originally belonged to Daoist Wuyang was directly seized. That Jiao Daoist Wuyang was not in his eyes at all. He was also afraid of Yuan Tianfang. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "That is an expert in the true fire spirit refinement realm. His position in the Yinma clan is even higher than mine. What do you want me to do? Since I can't beat him, I'll just keep a low profile." Daoist Wuyang, you are a sensible person. You don't have to encourage me here. I won't make a move now. Daoist Wuyang looked suspiciously at Chu Xiu. As far as he knew, this was not Chu Xiu's character. Was he, Chu Xiu, the kind of person who would endure silently? Moreover, since Chu Xiu said that he would not make a move now, did that mean that Chu Xiu would make a move in the future? However, it was clear that Chu Xiu did not wish to say anything. Thus, Daoist Wuyang could only leave for the time being. After Daoist Wuyang left, a cold glint appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. It wasn't that he couldn't tolerate it, but it depended on whether there was any value in tolerating it. Now that the opportunity had not come, of course, he had to endure for the time being. If there was a chance, Chu Xiu would not be like Yuan Tianfang, who had scruples about this and that. In terms of craziness, in fact, Chu Xiu was not inferior to the young Yuan Tianfang. At this moment, in Yanjing City, a monk in grey robes in his 30s followed the flow of people and walked silently into the city. This monk in grey robes had the strength of the unity of heaven and human realm. At this age, he was not considered weak. He wore a bamboo hat, like a wandering monk that covered his face. However, at this moment, under the bamboo hat, was a face that hid hatred and murderous intent. This monk was called Zongping, and he was a disciple of the Great Light Temple's Vajra courtyard. Of course, he also had a layman's name, Feng Changfeng. His father was the head of the Feng family, who had been publicly killed by Chu Xiu as a warning to others. The Great Light Temple was selecting disciples in the entire northern lands. The head of the Feng family could be said to be ecstatic that Zongping was able to enter the Great Light Temple. Although the Great Light Temple would not take the initiative to help a small family like the Feng family, there was Zongping. Everyone knew that his son was a disciple of the Great Light Temple, and he was also Zongxian's junior brother. In the future, he would definitely be able to borrow some glory, so all the major forces were very polite to the Feng family. Not long ago, Zongping received news that the entire Feng family had been annihilated. To be honest, Zongping did not like the Feng family, and he did not like that father of his. His mother was only one of his father's dozen or so concubines, and she was frail and sickly. When he was born, his mother died from a difficult labor, so he was also seen as an inauspicious person. From the time he was born, the amount of time he had spent with his father was not as much as when he had been selected as a disciple of the Great Light Temple. Furthermore, he did not like that utilitarian father of his and the Feng family, which was not big, but had a lot of scheming. However, no matter what, that was still his home, the Feng family that he was born into. After learning this news, Zongping did not eat or drink for 3 days. The elders of the sect had tried to persuade him to let it go. When could all the gratitude and grudges, right and wrong be settled? Unfortunately, Zongping's Buddhist Dharma cultivation was not up to par. He understood all these principles. Once he became a monk, he would be completely cut off from the secular world. The Great Light Temple could not possibly fight to the death with Chu Xiu for the family of a disciple like him. Furthermore, Zongping's background would also gain the sympathy of the teachers of the Great Light Temple, and they would take more care of him. However, principles were principles, and choices were choices. His family had been destroyed, and his hatred was as deep as the sea. Zongping could not let go of this hatred. Even though he knew that the other party was a famous devil in the pugilistic world, and he was just a little monk from the Great Light Temple, Zongping still came. He held a porcelain bottle tightly in his arms. That was the key to Zongping's confidence in taking revenge. Although the two of them were only one realm apart, this realm was a world of difference. Zongping did not even dare to dream about killing Chu Xiu with his own strength. Therefore, if he wanted to kill Chu Xiu, he could only rely on external forces. That porcelain bottle contained the 7 Knights devouring heart powder of the 5 poison sect. Even if a martial arts grandmaster came into contact with it, as long as they did not have the antidote within 7 days, they would definitely die. Speaking of which, Zongping's possession of this thing was related to Chu Xiu. Originally, the pugilistic world was very disdainful of all kinds of venomous insects, poisons, and the like. They thought that it was just a small trick and would not amount to much. However, since the last time Chu Xiu used the broken intestine insect to kill Fang Jinwu, this kind of despicable thing was recognized by people. As long as you had a certain level of strength, coupled with this kind of external object, once you performed well, it was not difficult for the weak to defeat the strong. Therefore, since that time, many people in the pugilistic world were collecting these things, and the Great Light Temple was collecting these insidious things. This 7 Knights devouring heart powder was obtained from a bandit from West Chu after Zongping killed him. Presumably, that person wanted to sell this thing to Northern Yen and make a big profit. In the end, before he could hand it over, Zongping learned that even his family had been destroyed. In Zongping's view, this was the cycle of heaven and retribution. This was Chu Xiu's retribution. Looking at the huge Yanjing city, Zongping furrowed his brows. He had been to Yanjing city before, but he was not very familiar with it. Most importantly, he was not familiar with Chu Xiu. Even if he wanted to poison him, he had to first find out about Chu Xiu's information, and then get close to Chu Xiu. Looking around, Zongping walked into a random restaurant in Yanjing city. Zongping was not a greenhorn in the pugilistic world. Among the Zong generation in the Great Light Temple, he was considered to be quite strong, so he had long been in the pugilistic world. He was very familiar with the various secrets and tricks of the pugilistic world. He did not understand Chu Xiu's information habits, but others did, such as Wind-Sweeping Tower. Wind-Sweeping Tower's anemophilia liked to stay in the restaurant the most, because it was accessible from all directions, and the information was the best. Sure enough, on the top floor of the restaurant, there was a warrior in his 30s, who was dressed in luxurious clothes, but had his sleeves rolled up. He had 2 folding fans on his back, and he had 2 small mustaches on the corners of his mouth. He looked neither fish nor fowl, and he was bragging with a circle of warriors. Zongping walked to his side, and whispered, "There's a big business coming." When that anemophilia heard the words big business, he immediately became excited, and waved his hand, saying, "I'll tell you about the righteous and demonic wars later, I'm here for business." For anemophilia, the thing that could make them the most excited was to discover big news, and the other was to sell big news. Bringing Zongping into the private room, that anemophilia asked, "What kind of news would this master like to buy?" Zongping said lightly, "How do you know I'm a master? Just because someone wears a monk's robe, does that mean he's a monk?" That anemophilia chuckled and said, "Of course, someone who wears a monk's robe is not necessarily a monk, but I can guarantee that master is definitely a monk, and a monk from the Great Light Temple. Master, every move you make has a certain regularity. Only the disciples of the Great Light Temple would be so strict when they first enter the sect, through all kinds of exercises that train the disciples' perseverance and patience. And Master, your right hand is always subconsciously placed below your heart, that's obviously the action of twisting the prayer beads often. Adding all these together, if you're still not a monk, then I can't think of any other possibilities. Zhongping nodded and said, the wind agent of the wind-sweeping tower really lives up to his reputation. That anemophilia smiled and said, Master, please excuse me. May I ask what kind of news Master is prepared to buy? Zhongping said in a deep voice, news about Chu Xiu. Everything about Chu Xiu, Chu Xiu's daily routine, and so on. That anemophilia suddenly shivered, and hurriedly said, Master, it's not that I don't want to sell it to you, but you also know Chu Xiu's identity, it's too sensitive, I really don't dare to sell it. If you really want it, go to the headquarters of the wind-sweeping tower and buy it from the tower master and the deputy tower master. Only they would dare to sell this kind of news. Zhongping frowned, just to buy a piece of news, did he have to go so far to Eastern Qi? And the news he got from Eastern Qi was also outdated. What are you afraid of? Afraid of Chu Xiu? The wind agent from the wind-sweeping tower smiled bitterly and said, in the whole of northern Yen, how many people can you find who aren't afraid of Chu Xiu? Zhongping said coldly, you're afraid of Chu Xiu, but aren't you afraid of me? Do you really think that a monk wouldn't dare to kill? Zhongping's body bloomed with a murderous intent. He had also killed people, and not just a few. Of course, most of them were demonic villains or bandits. This time, he was forced into a corner and could only resort to this kind of coercion. Don't. Master, please calm down, I'll sell the information. No. I'll give it to you for free, Master. I just hope that you won't tell anyone about me. Hearing that anemophilia said so, Zhongping said calmly, don't worry, I know the rules of the wind-sweeping tower, I won't reveal any of my plans. However, during this period, you must send me information at all times, or else, you know the consequences. After taking the information about Chu Xiu, Zhongping left the restaurant. However, behind him, the news agent from the pugilistic world changed his terrified expression. He spat in disdain and said, even the monks from the Temple of Great Light are here to fight? No matter how ruthless you are, can you be more ruthless than that, Lord? You were the one who broke the rules first, so don't blame me for being too quick with my mouth. After all, I'm old acquaintances with that Lord. Chapter 799. Zhongping thought that he was very lucky, but in fact, he was very unlucky. Yanjing City was so big, and there were countless wind agents from Wind-Sweeping Tower and some small forces. In the end, he picked a wind agent who was related to Chu Xiu. The wind agent who was interrogated by Zhongping was called Lu Yu. He was not a big figure in Wind-Sweeping Tower, but he had some fame in the northern Yen branch of Wind-Sweeping Tower. But a few years ago, when Lu Yu was still in Yendong, he was the first wind agent from Wind-Sweeping Tower to cooperate with Chu Xiu. It could be said that when Chu Xiu was able to enter the Longhu list, although it was Qi Yuanli who made the decision, it was Lu Yu who brought the news. Several years had passed, and Chu Xiu had gone from an itinerant cultivator of the pugilistic world in the past to a prominent figure of the demonic path whose name had shaken the pugilistic world. He could even be said to be the #1 figure of the younger generation of the demonic path, possessing astonishing might. As for Lu Yu, he was much more normal. The promotion of anemophilia in Wind-Sweeping Tower was not very fast. Wind-Sweeping Tower followed the rules, and the more information you could get, the higher your position would be. But Northern Yen was naturally flawed, and the power of the martial arts world could not compare with Eastern Qi or even Western Chu, so there were not many big events. Lu Yu used a few years to go from anemophilia in Yendong to anemophilia in Yanjing City, the capital of Northern Yen, and he was one of the people in charge. A monk from the Great Light Temple came to buy information about Chu Xiu, and it was such a fierce monk. Even an idiot could see that this was definitely not a good thing. Wind-Sweeping Tower had a rule that they could not leak information about their customers, but the monk just now was not a customer, and he even threatened him. Since this was the case, there was no problem for him to leak information about him. Most importantly, Lu Yu's intuition told him that there was definitely big news to be dug out. If he could become a witness to all of this, his status in Wind-Sweeping Tower would definitely rise after he obtained the news. Although Zhong Ping had wandered the Jianghu and had some experience, he had forgotten one thing: everyone had their own selfish motives. He had been too credulous in trusting Yu Ren, even though Wind-Sweeping Pavilion had a good reputation. During this time, Chu Xiu was only in the Zhenwu Hall for closed-door training. He was interrupted when he was familiarizing himself with the blood shadow technique, so he could make up for it successfully this time. Someone reported that an old friend had come to visit. This made Chu Xiu feel strange. What old friend did he have in northern Yen? After Lu Yu was invited in, Lu Yu cupped his hands at Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "I wonder if official Chu still recognizes me?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes as he looked at Lu Yu. He felt that he looked familiar, but he couldn't recognize him. After all, so many years had passed, and Lu Yu was just a minor character at that time. Lu Yu didn't mind. It was normal for Chu Xiu not to remember him, so he directly said, "I am Wind Intermediary Lu Yu of the Northern Yen branch of Wind-Sweeping Pavilion. Official Chu bought a lot of information from me when he was still in the Heavenly Sin branch of the Blue Dragon Society." Hearing Lu Yu say this, Chu Xiu suddenly remembered and said, "Oh, so it's you. Brother Lu's information has helped me a lot in the past." Lu Yu hurriedly said, "I don't dare to call myself official Chu brother. This time, I came to give you a piece of news, official Chu." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Oh. What news?" Lu Yu said in a deep voice, "Someone wants to kill you, official Chu." Chu Xiu said with a faint smile, "There are at least 8,000 people in the pugilistic world who want to kill me. Who knows, someone might be gnashing their teeth and wanting to cut me into pieces right now. You don't need to tell me, I know." Lu Yu touched his head and smiled awkwardly. "I didn't make it clear. The person who wants to kill you, official Chu, is someone from the Great Light Temple. Furthermore, he has already arrived at Yanjing City and forcefully asked me for information on you, official Chu. You know my strength. I can't resist at all, so I can only obey. However, I only gave him information about you, official Chu. There aren't any deep secrets." Chu Xiu frowned and said, "The Great Light Temple wants to kill me? That shouldn't be. If the Great Light Temple wanted to make a move, they would have done it when Su Yan came back then. Why would they wait until now?" Lu Yu explained, "It's Zhong Ping, a disciple of the Great Light Temple's Vajra department. He's a disciple of the Feng family. His father died in the hands of official Chu some time ago, and the Feng family was also destroyed by you, official Chu." Wind-Sweeping Tower's information was very detailed. Unless you were really unknown, as long as you had the slightest bit of fame in the pugilistic world, Wind-Sweeping Tower would record you. On the way here, Lu Yu had successfully obtained detailed information on Zhong Ping. Chu Xiu touched his chin. So that was the case. However, he did not mind. Among the Great Light Temple's Zhong generation of martial artists, other than Zhong Xian, no one else had stepped into the realm of martial arts grandmasters. To the current Chu Xiu, those below the martial arts grandmaster level were like ants. He did not need to care about them. Over the years, he had destroyed many clans and sections. The number of people who wanted to kill him could form an entire sect. However, Lu Yu was just a junior martial artist. If not for the fact that he was from the Great Light Temple, Lu Yu would not have come to report to him to claim credit. However, at that moment, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. A cold gleam flashed in his eyes, which gave Lu Yu a fright. Chu Xiu suddenly asked, "This Zhong Ping wants to kill me. What do you think he'll do? Or has his mind been eroded by hatred, and he's prepared to kill me just like that? Lu Yu hesitated for a moment. He did not know why Chu Xiu asked that. However, he thought about it and said, although this Zhong Ping hates official Chu to the core, he doesn't seem crazy. He's very clear-headed when he does things, and he won't be impulsive or reckless. If he wants to kill you, there's only one simple way, and that's to poison you. Back then, you used the gut-rupturing goo to cause Fang Jinwu's strength to plummet. In the end, you were able to kill him. Right now, Zhong Ping might be thinking of the same thing. Using something like poison to weaken official Chu's strength to the lowest level might work. Not everyone knew the details of how Chu Xiu killed Fang Jinwu. Only those who had truly studied Chu Xiu knew about it. Everyone could only see that Chu Xiu had used a despicable method to kill Fang Jinwu with poison. However, in reality, if this method was so useful, the strongest sect in the pugilistic world would be the Five Venoms Order. However, in reality, using poison was extremely difficult. Ordinary martial arts grandmasters were battle-hardened existences. They were very sensitive to any abnormal factors, and their perception was already very shocking. Therefore, even if the poison was really colorless and tasteless, and there was no way to detect it, for those above the martial arts grandmaster level, they could still sense the danger and thus avoid the disaster. The last time Chu Xiu succeeded in using the goo, it was mainly because Chu Xiu had controlled Fang Jinwu's disciple, Chen Jinting, and used him to use the goo, which lowered Fang Jinwu's vigilance to the lowest. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Did Zhong Ping ask you to provide him with real-time news about me?" Lu Yu hesitated for a moment and nodded. Chu Xiu said, "Then tell him later that I'll be having dinner with Yuan Tianfang at the Flourishing Moon restaurant in Yanjing City in 3 days." Lu Yu looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. What is he trying to do? He had already revealed the news to Chu Xiu about someone like Zhong Ping. He didn't even need to do anything himself. He could easily crush the other party by sending a few of his elites. As a result, Chu Xiu seems to be fishing just to catch Zhong Ping. Is it interesting? Lu Yu was very puzzled, but after meeting Chu Xiu's eyes, he immediately nodded and said, "No problem, official Chu, I will do it immediately." Chu Xiu nodded with satisfaction and said, "Not bad, then I will trouble you with this matter. I have a good relationship with Qi Yuanli of your wind-sweeping tower. I will mention you in front of him. Also, what do you want by giving me such news?" In the early years, Chu Xiu did have some cooperation with Lu Yu, but it was limited to cooperation. The friendship between the two sides was not too deep. Everyone in the world came for benefits. Now that the other party was in a hurry to not send the news to him, even an idiot knew that Lu Yu must have a plan. Lu Yu laughed and said, "Official Chu, don't be offended. What I want is actually very simple. I just want to stay by your side during this period of time. I want to see how you take back the Jianghu Hall. This is great news." Chu Xiu looked at Lu Yu with a faint smile and said, "Your wind-sweeping tower must know about Yuan Tianfang's matter. He is an expert in the true fire spiritual refinement realm. Why are you so confident in me?" Lu Yu nodded and said, "If it was someone else, of course I wouldn't have confidence. However, if it is you, official Chu, I can guarantee that the Jianghu Hall will definitely return to your hands in the end." "Why?" "Because you are Chu Xiu." A smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. The people of Wind-Sweeping Tower were indeed eloquent. Their flattery was naturally not explicit. It was quite fresh and refined. After Lu Yu left, he immediately sent a message to Zhong Ping. After receiving the news, Zhong Ping immediately began to disguise himself. With Lu Yu's active help, he changed into a fake identity and sneaked into the Flourishing Moon Pavilion in advance. As for Chu Xiu, he asked Mei Qinglian to send a message to invite Yuan Tianfang to the Flourishing Moon Pavilion for a talk. Both parties were in the Jianghu Hall, but Chu Xiu insisted on taking him outside to talk. In Yuan Tianfang's view, Chu Xiu was afraid that he could not hold on and was ready to give in. However, Yuan Tianfang did not intend to let Chu Xiu go. How could he let go of the hatred of his disciples' murder? However, Yuan Tianfang still agreed to Chu Xiu. He just wanted to humiliate Chu Xiu on the spot. In the past, when he wanted to make a move on Chu Xiu, not only did Wei Shiya come forward to stop him, but Dong Huang Tai also spoke up for him. He was an expert in the true fire spiritual refinement realm and also a big shot of the hidden devil lineage. He wanted to deal with a junior, but he was still so aggrieved. This had long made Yuan Tianfang furious. Now, it was time to return the favor. You're tuning in to the UnparalleledSwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.